you don't exist. Take a perk and a talk of that shit. Money swallowed like sis. Did it perfect in the kid. Got a billion who sang on my head. Look at better put on the road I just spent. I know we got $1 million. The devil that shit ain't not cheap again.
Hello and welcome back, fellow anime lovers, to MangaMuse. I am delighted to have you join us once again in the world of fanfiction and fantasy. This is the 5th part of What If Deku Learns Under the Batman. Smash the like, share and subscribe button for more. Also press the bell icon so that you never miss such great parts. Thanks for the introduction. Now let's dive into the world. Tamura Shigaraki was pissed off. Very pissed off. If one was to observe Tamura Shigaraki, then one would argue that this was hardly unusual. However, not many people knew Shigaraki like Kurogiri did, and his current disposition was beginning to worry him. Shigaraki was leaning on the bar, brooding and staring at a photo he held aloft in his hand. Clutched tightly in his other hand, so tightly that it was beginning to bleed, was a black shuriken-like object, carved in the shape of a bat. The photo was of the boy who had taken second place in the UA Sports Festival, the same one who had stabbed him with the very shuriken he was holding. The boy had shown considerable skill and ability during their attack on the USJ. He managed to catch them both by surprise, rupture the armored plating around Kurogiri's neck, and fend off their forces long enough for All Might and the UA teachers to arrive. It was obvious that this boy acted as a ringleader of sorts, and was able to inspire the others into action easily. The sports festival had showcased this further, demolishing any doubt about this young upstart's abilities and skills from even the most seasoned of pro heroes. But it was the capture of the hero killer by the hands of this boy, izukumidoriya, that had truly pushed this boy into the interest of the League of Villains. For a young quirkless boy to take down one of the most dangerous criminal assassins the country had faced in years, one who had already killed and crippled dozens of pro heroes without effort, was earth-shattering. Even the master was impressed by this demonstration. This was a fact most shocking, as he was really only interested in powerful quirks. And considering that the boy did not possess a quirk of his own, to garner the master's respect is a feat not achieved by many. But Shigaraki did not share his master's feelings on the matter. The boy had hurt him, humiliated him. Nobody who paid Shigaraki such disrespect lived for long. But the hero killer added a new wrinkle to the equation. Everyone was fawning over how great this izukumidoriya was, but many were also admiring the hero killer's strength of will and tenacity to fight against a system of false idols. Every day he was garnering more and more popularity, and it was all the government could do to stem the inevitable tidal wave of copycats and villainous hopefuls that would befall them. A wave the League of Villains had every intention of riding. But Shigaraki was undeterred in his hatred of the hero killer. Stain's words continued to echo in his head. "You lack conviction." That pissed him off. The young brat Izukumidoriya, the hero killer Stain, and the worst of the lot, All Might. He hated them all. He wanted them dead, and they were so close he could almost feel them with his fingertips, but still annoyingly out of reach. He felt his blood boiling in his veins as he continued to brood over the picture of this brat, this quirkless upstart, and all that he represented. "Are you curious, Tamura Shigaraki?" asked Kurogiri suddenly. About the boy. The bell above the door jingled before Shigaraki could answer. Someone had entered the bar. Shigaraki came the familiar, drawling voice of Jiren. He walked into the bar with an annoying smug look on his face, his speech slightly skewed as he tried to hold the lit cigarette between his lips. Jiren was a broker who allied himself with the League years ago, supplying them with resources to fuel the Master's war machine. "You've been the talk of the town for the past few days," he continued. "I hear you're onto something big." "Who are they?" Shigaraki interrupted. Jiren's smug look was undeterred, stepping aside as two individuals entered the bar. One was a tall male, between mid to late 20s in age. It was difficult to tell, as most of his exposed body seemed to be a mix of purple patchwork skin sewn onto his natural epidermal layer. He carried himself in an aloof manner, as if he was here against his will. Standing beside him was a young woman, in her late teens to early 20s. She wore a school uniform with a large, ill-fitting sweater. She bounced up and down in an excited, bubbly manner, like a young schoolgirl would, but Shigaraki wasn't fooled. Her lips were curled into a twisted smile, and her eyes suggested a mania that Shigaraki was all too familiar with. "I have to say, you look much more gross in person," said the man bluntly. The girl jumped up and down excitedly. "Wow, you're the hand guy," she said. "You're friends with Stainy, right? I want to join too. Let me join the League of Villains." Shigaraki scowled. He clasped the picture tightly in his hands, which disintegrated to dust in an instant, and pocketed the bat-shaped shuriken. "Kurogiri, get rid of these two," he said, dismissing them with a wave of his hand. They're everything I hate in one set, a brat and a rude guy. Jiren brought them all this way, said Kurogiri. Let's at least hear them out, Tamura Shigaraki. I don't care what you do with them, said Jiren, so long as I get my commission. He gestured to the girl. This one's name and face were kept quiet by the media, but she's on the run as the suspect of a series of murders. I'm Himiko Toga, she said, as if introducing herself to a classroom. Life is hard. I want the world to become an easier place to live. I want to become Staney. I want to kill Staney, she said, shaking with excitement at her last words. So let me join the League of Villains, Tamura. Is she crazy? Said Shigaraki. She's coherent ... for the most part, said Jiren. I'm sure she'll come in handy. He motioned over to the tall man next to him. This guy hasn't committed any flashy crimes, but he holds fast to the hero killer's ideals. I don't know about this, said the tall man. Do these guys really have a just cause? He looked over at Toga. And don't tell me you're going to let this crazy woman in, too. Seems to me like this crazy lady has already accomplished more than you, said Shigaraki. The least you could do is give me your name like an adult. I'm currently known as Dabai, the man replied. I meant your real name, said Shigaraki, his annoyance growing. I'll tell you when it's time, said Dabai stubbornly. I carry out the will of the hero killer. Shigaraki grunted in frustration, getting to his feet. You say that like I should care, he snarled. Everyone's so hung up on Stain. It's all Stain, Stain, Stain. Shigaraki Kurogiri said warningly. It pisses me off. Faster than one could blink, Shigaraki rushed at the new arrivals. Toga pulled a knife from her oversized sleeve and thrust it towards the attacking Shigaraki. Dabai lunged forward towards Shigaraki, his own hand outstretched in attack. There was a flash of dark purple smoke, and everyone's attacks were harmlessly redirected away from their targets. Please calm down, Tamura Shigaraki, said Kurogiri. If you wish to achieve your ultimate goal, we must increase the organization's numbers. We are now in the spotlight, and this is our chance. Shigaraki relaxed, his hands dropping to his side. Shut up, he said sullenly, walking past Dabai and Toga. Where are you going? Asked Kurogiri. Shigaraki didn't answer, simply walking out the door. Jiren cleared his throat, scratching his head. I hate to complain about a client, but, he said awkwardly, he's young. Too young, if you ask me. I thought we were going to die, said Toga cheerfully. Dabai scowled. He makes me sick. I'm afraid we must reconvene later, said Kurogiri. We will provide you with an answer at a later time. But I believe that he knows what he must do. Otherwise, he added ominously, instead of leaving, he would have killed you. The atmosphere in Class 1 of the day after the final exams was heavy, to say the least. Many of Izuku's classmates, particularly the ones who had failed in their practical exams, were already losing hope at the chance to attend the summer training camp. If we failed our exams, we won't be able to go to the summer training camp, said Kaminari sullenly. We'll have to make it all up in summer school. I'm worried too, said Siro. My team only passed because of Maita. I was knocked out for the whole thing. The door to the classroom opened with a bang. Everyone shut up and get in your seats, said Aizawa. He stepped to the front of the room as the class all hurriedly clambered into their seats. Unfortunately, there were those who did not pass the final exams. Accordingly, for the training camp in the woods, his mouth twisted into an uncharacteristic smile. Everyone is going. The class was in uproar. We're all going, said Kirishima excitedly. Aizawa nodded. While there are some who failed the practical exam, no one failed the written exam, he said. The training camp in the woods is designed to help you get stronger. Those who failed the exam need it the most. The smile returned. It was a logical deception. However, the smile vanished. Failure is failure. We have prepared additional lessons for all of you who failed the practical exam. In all frankness, these lessons will be tougher than ones you would receive in summer school, so you better not slack off. For the rest of the day, the class was buzzing with excitement about the training camp. Even the thought of extra lessons for those who failed was not enough to dampen their spirits. Class 1 had a lot to do to prepare for the training camp. The group decided to take a trip to the local Kiyashi Ward shopping center to get the supplies they needed. This was the first time they all spent time together outside of training and study. Izuku accompanied them, but somewhat reluctantly. Bruce and Alfred had already supplied him weeks ahead of time with what he needed for the trip, and he still wasn't used to the attention he was receiving from the public for his fight with the hero killer. With some urging from the others, however, he relented and joined them. The class chattered about happily as they walked through the center. They decided to all split up and meet back later once they all gathered their things. Izuku expected Uraraka to want to go with him, but left in a rush with the others. She had been acting strangely lately, and seemed to talk to and spend time with Izuku less frequently than she used to. Izuku decided to put it out of his mind, for now. He was now by himself, and he figured that while he was there he could get some shopping done. "Hey, it's the kid who beat the hero killer," he heard a voice say. Izuku looked around, unable to discern where it was coming from in the crowds. A tall man in a hoodie sidled up beside him and put his arm around his neck in an uncomfortably familiar fashion. "I can't believe my luck," the man said. "Running into you again." Izuku tensed. He recognized the voice. Before he could react, he felt 4 fingers clasp around his throat. He looked up slowly to see the face of Tamura Shigaraki staring down at him. It was the first time he saw him without his mask, but he could recognize him anywhere. "Why don't we have a little chat, Izukumidoriya?" he said, smiling perversely. You could say that Izuku was caught with his pants down. He cursed at himself internally as they made their way throughout the mall. He let his guard down for one moment, and Shigaraki was easily able to get the drop on him. "Just a simple talk," said Shigaraki, "and don't try anything funny." Izuku could feel his 5th finger stroking his throat just above his Adam's apple, sending a chill down Izuku's spine. "The moment I put all 5 fingers on your throat, you'll crumble to dust in less than a minute." "Not a private place for a murder, Shigaraki," said Izuku. "A hero will catch you in the same amount of time." "Maybe," Shigaraki replied, "but not before I've had my fun. I could crumble at least 30 people before I'm caught, and they would all be on your head." Izuku looked at his surroundings. There were families, children, men and women everywhere. If there was one thing he was certain of, Shigaraki wasn't the bluffing type. Even if he did get caught, the collateral damage would be catastrophic. He had no choice. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked. "You know," Shigaraki continued as he and Izuku sat down on one of the mall benches. "I still have that bat shuriken you stabbed me with back at the USJ. My hand still hasn't healed completely. I should have cut your fingers off," Izuku spat back. "A lost opportunity." "What do you want, Shigaraki?" "I hate everything," said Shigaraki. "I hate you, and I hate All Might. But what pisses me off the most right now is this stupid hero killer." "He's not with you," said Izuku, surprised. "I don't acknowledge him as a member of the League of Villains, but that's how the news has portrayed him," Shigaraki replied. "That's the problem. Everyone is obsessed with the hero killer. The attack on UA, the nomus I released on Hosu City, everything I have done has been completely upstaged by him." He looked at Izuku. "And then there's you. Everyone is fawning over you for taking him down. Even the hero killer himself saw you as an equal to All Might. Why? What makes you so important? What makes him so important? In the end, he just destroyed what he didn't like. What makes him so different from me, Midoriya? Is that what this is?" said Izuku. "An identity crisis. I don't care what anyone says, Stain is a murderous psychopath who tried to kill my friend. But at least I can understand him." "What are you talking about?" said Shigaraki. "I understand what drives him, what makes him what he is," said Izuku. "In his own twisted way, he wants to follow in All Might's footsteps and bring about a better world. He doesn't kill just because he wants to. But you," Izuku continued venomously, "all you care about is death and destruction. You kill out of annoyance, anger, or even your own amusement. You're wasting your time comparing yourself to the hero killer. To me." He stared into Shigaraki's eyes. "You're no better than the Joker." Shigaraki's bloodshot eyes stared into Izuku's very soul, but Izuku didn't falter. A smile twisted onto Shigaraki's cracked and scarred face, and he began to laugh. "So that's it, huh?" said Shigaraki. "It's like a weight off my chest." What are you talking about?" Izuku said quickly. "When all is said and done, it all boils down to one person. All Might," said Shigaraki. Izuku could feel Shigaraki's grip tighten on his throat. "How do you come to that conclusion?" Izuku said hoarsely. "All Might inspires trash like you, like the hero killer," said Shigaraki. "And these people smile thoughtlessly because he smiles thoughtlessly, as if there's no one he can't save. It's not about having a cause or having convictions. It's about taking out the bottom corner in a house of cards. All Might is the corner card. Get rid of him, and it all comes tumbling down." He began to laugh perversely, tightening his grip on Izuku. "I'm so glad we had this talk, Midoriya." Izuku's mind was racing. Shigaraki was stronger than he looked. If he tried to fight him, people could get hurt. But he wasn't sure how much longer he had until Shigaraki let him go, or killed him. And it was beginning to look like the latter was more likely. "Deku." Izuku looked up and saw Uraraka standing just a few feet from Shigaraki and himself. Fear crept into Izuku's heart. The danger posed by Shigaraki to these civilians was bad enough, but if he made one wrong move, it could cost him his best friend as well. Uraraka felt bad for running off on Izuku like she did. Ever since her test with Aoyama, she was having a hard time being around him. He must have noticed by now. He was brilliant after all. "Do you like Midoriya?" She shook her head, trying to clear her thoughts. Aoyama didn't know what he was talking about. She respected Izuku and looked up to him. He was her best friend, but it's not like she was in love with him or anything. Are you sure about that? The thought creeped into her head suddenly. She blushed fiercely and shook her head again. She couldn't think about that right now. She had to find Deku and apologize to him. Steeling herself, she began her trek across the mall when she heard a voice adjacent to her. I'm so glad we had this talk, Midoriya. Uraraka followed the voice until she found its source. Izuku was sitting on the bench. Sitting next to him was a tall, slim man with long, unkempt silver hair covered by a black hoodie. The sight of him made her uneasy. Deku, she said, approaching him. The man had his hand gripped around Izuku's throat, who kept his face passive, but she could see a fear behind his eyes that she read all too loudly. Run away now, before you get hurt. Uraraka cursed herself internally. If she hadn't abandoned him at the beginning of their trip, he wouldn't be in this situation. Hey, she said, trying to sound fiercer than she felt. Let him go. The man pulled away instantly, holding up his hands. Izuku gasped for air, immediately rubbing his neck. Oh, I see that you have a friend here, the man said cheerfully. Sorry to keep you, I'll be on my way. Try to follow me, and I'll get angry. She heard him whisper to Izuku. Uraraka rushed to Izuku's side. Shigaraki, Izuku said. What does All for One want? Uraraka looked at the man in shock. Shigaraki paused for a moment. Who knows, really, he said. You should worry more about yourself. The next time we meet, I will most likely kill you. And without another word, he disappeared into the crowd. Uraraka reported what happened between Izuku and Shigaraki, and the shopping mall was put on emergency closure while heroes and the police conducted an investigation of the surrounding area. In the end, they could not find Tamura Shigaraki. Izuku was taken to the police station where he was questioned by the head detective on the case, Naomasa Tsukachi. When he had arrived at the station, Batman was there waiting for him. An hour passed and Izuku had told them everything about their conversation. Batman had questioned him the hardest, calling him to remember every little detail he could about the encounter. It sounds like they aren't as big an organization as we once thought, said Tsukachi. But the part where he wants to kill All Might hasn't changed. The hero killer rattled his cage, said Batman. Can you think of anything else, Midoriya? No, said Izuku. I wish I could have detained him. You acted in a manner that prevented loss of life, said Bruce. Had anyone else been in this situation, it could have been much worse. Batman is right, said Tsukachi. Most other people would have panicked. The fact that there were no victims is thanks to you staying calm. That made Izuku feel a little better. Izuku and Batman excused themselves from Tsukachi and they exited the police station. Your mother is on her way to pick you up, said Batman. He pushed a few buttons on his gauntlet, and Izuku heard the engines of the Batmobile roar to life in the distance, then get louder as it drove up to the curb in front of them. Batman looked at Izuku as if expecting something, but he was silent. What is it? Said Batman. It's nothing. Just, Izuku said, trying to formulate the words. I thought I would be ready to face Shigaraki again, but he took me completely by surprise. I wasn't as prepared as I thought I was, and if Uraraka hadn't come when she had, I would probably. The words stopped in his throat. You can't always be ready for any given situation, said Batman. In times such as those, you have to be prepared to think on your feet and find ways to minimize the potential damage around you, even if it means letting the villain get away. Izuku turned at the sound of his name to see his mother running towards him. Her eyes were puffy and wet with tears as she embraced him. I can't do it anymore, she said. My heart can't take it. It's okay, Mom, said Izuku. I'm fine. Batman and the police were taking good care of me. Batman, his mother said, angrily approaching the hulking figure of Izuku's mentor. You're supposed to be protecting him. Bruce Wayne said that you would keep him from any harm, and nothing but harm has befallen him. Mom, it's not his fault, Izuku began, but Batman held up his hand, silencing him. He didn't need my protecting, Mrs. Midoriya, said Batman. It was he who did the protecting. It's because of your son that many lives were spared in the shopping center today. Izuku's mother was taken aback by this. She hadn't gotten the full details on what happened yet, only that Izuku was accosted by a villain. The police had taken her to the station just after informing her of the situation. Izuku saved lives, she said, finding her voice again. You must be very proud to have a hero such as Midoriya for a son, said Batman, hopping into the open top of the Batmobile. Without another word, he sped off into the distance. The police officer who had brought his mother here placed them in the car and escorted them home. The drive to the apartment was quiet. Izuku had a lot to think about. Shigaraki's words kept playing in his head. It's about taking out the bottom corner in a house of cards. All Might is the corner card. Get rid of him, and it all comes tumbling down. Izuku was worried, despite himself. Shigaraki was right. If All Might really was the cornerstone of their hero society, what would happen if that cornerstone was removed? And only a few people knew that this time was fast approaching. All Might's powers were quickly waning. If Shigaraki managed to get what he wanted and was able to kill All Might, well, Izuku shuddered to think about it. He wished he could have stopped Shigaraki then and there. He looked out the window of the police cruiser as it drove through the city. Wherever you are, Shigaraki, Izuku thought. Next time, I'll be ready. Kamino Ward. Midnight. A man sat by himself in a dark room, illuminated only by the soft glow of artificial light from the many computer screens before him. The man was connected to various machines, tubes and containers protruding from his skin, carrying unknown liquids in and out of his body. His face was heavily scarred from the sallow sockets that once held his eyes down to his lips, which were curved upward in a perverse smile. His fingers were knitted together in contemplation. Although he could no longer see in the traditional sense, he used a quirk to help him view the monitors before him without much effort. They displayed the interface of the various networks and systems that were running, ranging from surveillance to monitoring the current physical vitals registered by the machines the man was hooked up to. But the information he was presently concerned with were plastered on the monitor before him, the images of All Might, Batman, and the boy izukumidoriya. Although All Might was the main focus, it was the introduction of the other two outliers in his plan that had captured his interest. The door behind him opened, bathing the man in the light of the hallway. "Close the door, doctor," said the man without turning. "And come join me." "Of course, master," said the doctor, closing the door and joining the man beside him. "Studying your enemies again?" "Naturally," said the master. "You've taken quite an interest in this quirkless boy," said the doctor in a matter-of-fact fashion. "I'm more than interested," said the master. "This boy can stand shoulder to shoulder with even his strongest of classmates. His mentor has provided him with a number of tools and weapons to assist him," said the doctor. "It isn't his tools that make him powerful," replied the master. "It is his mind. He is able to outthink his opponents. In doing so, he wins the battle before it even begins. He reminds me of..." The master trailed off, going silent. "Do you believe them to be a threat?" said the doctor. "The boy and the Batman?" "Perhaps," said the master, "but it is a risk I am prepared to take." "What do you mean?" "Every bit of information I have gathered on this boy has been more and more interesting," said the master. "Quirkless since birth, but of vast intelligence and superior training by arguably one of the most dangerous men in the world. What's more, my sources say that he once idolized my old nemesis, but now seems to hate him. This is an opportunity that I cannot ignore." He turned to the doctor. "This boy may be the perfect key for All Might's undoing, and he will be mine. By going after his protege, we may bring Batman's wrath down upon us," said the doctor. The master thought for a moment. "Kurogiri," said the master. He spoke into the television that let him observe Shigaraki in the dive bar. "I am here, master," said Kurogiri. "Have Jurin contact the mercenary," the master said. "He may be exactly what we need in this situation. Now that you have finished up your first semester at UA High, your summer vacation officially begins." Aizawa stood before classes 1A and 1B outside the gates of UA. The bus to take them to their summer training camp was waiting to take them to their destination. "However," he continued, "don't think that these will be months of rest for you heroes in the making. At this camp, we'll push you to go beyond your limits. You're aiming to become plus ultra." Both classes began piling into their respective assigned buses, all jabbering excitedly about the camp that awaits them. Izuku was silent, going over the notes in his notebook while the class around him goofed off. An hour later, Class 1A's bus stopped at a scenic rest area, overlooking a vast forest area. Aizawa ordered them to pile out of the bus. "Huh?" said Kirishima. "This isn't much of a rest area. And where's Class B? You don't think we stopped here just so you could stretch your legs, do you?" said Aizawa. Before the students could answer, a black sedan drove up and stopped at the rest area, and two women, a blonde and a brunette, emerged from the cab. They were dressed from head to toe in elaborate cat-themed costumes, including tails attached to their skirts, cat ears, and huge paw-shaped gloves over their hands. Izuku recognized them immediately as two of the members of the Wild Wild Pussycats, a four-person pro-hero team that specialized in mountain rescue. Izuku didn't recognize the small boy that followed them out of the car. He wore a red hat with large protruding spikes that did little to hide the scowl that lined his face. "These are the pros you'll be working with during your training," said Aizawa, bowing to the Pussycats. "Long time, no see." "Hey, Eraser," said the blonde Pussycat, Pixie Bob. "So these are the students we'll be tormenting this year, eh?" Izuku didn't like the sound of that tormenting comment. "Say hello, everyone," said Aizawa. "Nice to meet you," the class said in unison. "Hello kids," said Mandalay, the brunette pussycat. "We own this whole stretch of land out here. The camp that you'll be staying at is at the base of that mountain." She pointed towards the far end of the forest. "That's pretty far," said Uraraka. "Why did we stop out here instead of out there?" Uraraka's eyes widened with realization. "I think we all know the answer to that," said Asui. "That can't be right," said Sato. "Maybe we should get back on the bus," said Siro nervously. "The current time is 9:30 am, said Mandalay, smiling viciously. "If you're fast about it, you might make it there by who don't make it there by 12:30 won't get any lunch. You can use your quirks as much as you want to. Save yourselves," shouted Kirishima. All the students tried to run back to the bus, but Pixie Bob was waiting for them. She crouched and extended her hands to the ground. A faint blue glow began to shine around them, and the ground beneath her began to shift. Izuku realized she was using her quirk, the ability to manipulate Earth's soil, similar to Cementos with concrete. "As you have already guessed, class," said Aizawa, "the training camp has already begun." Class 1 screamed as the ground beneath them swallowed them up like a tidal wave, throwing them over the rest stop overpass and down into the forest below. As the dirt settled back into the ground beneath them, they all began to pick themselves up. "Why do we keep falling for Aizawa's tricks?" complained Gyro. "Well, I guess there's nothing for it," said Kirishima, dusting himself off. "Might as well get going." Minto was the first one into the forest, trying to find a secluded spot to relieve himself. He stopped dead in his tracks, however, screaming as he stared into the toothy, gaping maw of a gigantic creature the likes of which Izuku had never seen. "We're all gonna die," shouted Kaminari and Siro in unison. "Minto, get out of the way," shouted Izuku. Minto was frozen in fear of the beast before him. Izuku used his grapple gun to latch onto Minto and drag him away as the monster slammed its large clawed foot onto the spot he was standing. Koda attempted to speak to the creature as his quirk allowed him to speak to animals, but the creature largely ignored him. Could this monster be immune? Izuku thought to himself. But as Izuku looked closer, he noticed something off about the creature. Its hide had a rough, grainy texture to it, as if it was made of dirt. That's when it dawned on Izuku that this monster was just a giant dirt clod. Pixie Bob must still be using her quirk against them. Izuku launched an explosive batarang into the creature's mouth, causing its head to explode into a cloud of dirt and debris. "They're just dirt mounds," shouted Izuku. "Take them down. Don't you think you've got these kids on a crazy schedule, Eraser?" said Mandalay back at the rest stop. "Yeah," said Aizawa. "We're hoping to fit in an entire second semester's worth of knowledge in them here. That's going to take an intense amount of work, but the rewards will be worth it. They'll be able to get permits to use their quirks, and they'll get provisional licenses so they can act as heroes in an emergency. Plus, with all the villainous activity we've been tracking, they need to be able to defend themselves." "What about your quirkless student, Midoriya?" said Mandalay. "Don't you think he'll have a hard time keeping up?" "I don't think you have to worry about that, Mandalay," said Pixie Bob, adjusting her visor. She was using it to monitor the students' activity from her vantage point while using her quirk to create the monsters they were facing. "He's taken down 3 of my beasts by himself already." "Seriously?" said Mandalay, surprised. "That's a common reaction when it comes to Midoriya," said Aizawa. "He leads by example, surpassing all expectations, and his classmates tend to fall in line behind him, so I have no doubt that they'll surpass expectations as well." The young boy continued to watch disdainfully as the heroes in training fought through Pixie Bob's onslaught. "Idiots," he thought angrily. "How pointless, wanting to be a hero." Dusk fell on the grounds of the training camp. Aizawa, Pixie Bob, and Mandalay all waited for Class 1 outside the community center. "The litter is almost here," said Pixie Bob cheerfully. "That took a lot longer than expected," said Mandalay. One by one, the students of Class 1 slowly emerged from the edge of the forest, looking as if they were marching out of the gates of hell. They were covered in dirt, cuts, mud, and all sorts of abrasions. Ito was limping, a small smoke stream billowing from his injured calf. Todoroki was covered in frost on his left side. Uraraka was having trouble walking a straight line, looking sick and covering her mouth to prevent vomiting. Siro, Kirishima, Sato, and Shoji all came lumbering out of the forest, their clothes torn from the use of their quirks. Aoyama couldn't stand up straight, doubled over as he clutched his stomach. Izuku had exhausted most of his supply of explosives. His hands ached from the use of his explosive gauntlets. Finally, the last of the students came lumbering out of the woods, coming to a stop outside the community center with their instructors. "You said we'd get here by noon," said Siro. "I guess we timed it based on how long it would take us to do it." "Sorry," said Mandalay. "Now you're just rubbing it in," said Sato glumly. "I'm starving," said Kirishima. "This is hell." "I thought it would take you kids even longer to get here," said Pixie Bob. You did much better against my dirt monsters than I thought you would. Especially this young boy, she added, pointing to Izuku. I call dibs on that one. She licked her lips, sending a slight chill down Izuku's spine. Aizawa rolled his eyes. Has she always been like this? He said to Mandalay. It's been a bit worse lately, she said. She hasn't had a date in years. Izuku looked away from Pixie Bob and noticed the young boy he saw from earlier standing next to Mandalay. He stood there quietly, but Izuku could almost feel the intense anger emanating from his glaring eyes. Excuse me, but who is this? Izuku asked Mandalay. Oh, this is Koda, Mandalay replied. He's my cousin's son, he lives with us now. Don't be shy. Koda, say hi to everyone. Koda continued his glaring silence. Izuku figured perhaps he should make the first friendly gesture, approaching the boy. Hello, Koda, he said, extending his hand. My name is Midoriya, from UA High. Koda said nothing, but instead, with a speed faster than Izuku had seen any child move, threw a solid straight punch into his groin. Izuku doubled over in the pain, seeing spots in his vision and nearly throwing up. What a low blow, said Ida, shocked, running to Izuku's aid. You fiend of a child. A punch to the scrotum is unforgivable. The boy turned and walked away. The last thing I want is to hang with some wannabe heroes. Izuku couldn't help but smile through the pain. It was like looking at Kaken as a kid. The class all gathered into the community center for dinner, prepared by the wild pussycats themselves. Izuku was still slightly reeling from his punch to the groin, but that didn't stop him from gorging himself. He was so hungry that he would have said their food tasted almost as good as Alfred's. Almost. This is the only night we're doing this for you, said Pixie Bob. So make sure you enjoy it. After dinner, they all went to bathe before turning in for the night. The bath houses were ornately designed around natural mountain hot springs, decorated with large bonsai trees, boulders, and an expensive mahogany boardwalk leading to the baths. The warm water felt like heaven to Izuku's aching body. Midoriya, don't you go anywhere without that utility belt, said Kirishima, gesturing to the belt on the platform next to Izuku, who merely shrugged. Mainta stood on the platform by the large wooden fence that separated the male and female baths. This obstacle did not serve as a deterrent for Mainta, using his quirk in an attempt to scale the fence to get a peek on the other side. Get down from there, now, shouted Ida. What you are doing is shameful for the girls and yourself. Mainta ignored the class representative's scolding and continued to climb, nearly to the top before coming face to face with. Before you become a hero, said Koda, standing over Mainta on the top of the wall. You should learn how to be a good human. He then pushed Mainta off the wall and back down into the bath below, where he landed directly atop Ida. Thanks so much, Koda, babe. Koda turned behind him to see who was addressing him, only to catch a full view of the girls of Class 1 below in the baths, thanking him for stopping Mainta. Startled, he slipped on the ladder he was standing on and fell backwards down towards the male baths. Izuku instinctively snatched the grapple gun from his belt and launched himself towards Koda, grabbing him before he hit the boardwalk below. Once out of the bath, Izuku realized the boy was unconscious and quickly rushed him to the management office where the pussycats were. The rush from the fall likely caused him to faint, said Mandalay after inspecting the unconscious Koda. Thank you. Eraser warned me one of you boys was a little girl crazy, so I stationed Koda up there to keep watch. She placed a warm rag on Koda's head. Well, I'm just glad he's alright, said Izuku, shifting awkwardly. He only had a moment to drape himself in a towel before taking him to Mandalay, and he felt slightly embarrassed at his appearance, especially considering he was in the presence of a pro hero. Honestly, you keep surprising me, said Mandalay. When Eraser said you were quirkless, I thought he was pulling my leg. But you honestly live up to the reputation painted in the news when you took down the hero killer. Izuku shifted awkwardly again. I was lucky, he said. He turned his attention back to Koda, his words passing through Izuku's mind. The last thing I want is to hang with some wannabe heroes. He doesn't like heroes very much, does he? Growing up, I always wanted to be a hero. Most people I knew growing up did as well. Hard to see a kid his age so against heroes. How observant, said Mandalay, sighing. Of course, he isn't alone. There are many in our society who don't approve of us. Izuku's mind immediately flashed to Stain. Maybe if he had a normal childhood, he would have admired heroes like you did growing up, Mandalay continued. What happened? Izuku asked. Mandalay's cousins, said Pixie Bob, entering the room. Koda's parents. They were heroes, too. They were murdered. Mandalay nodded sadly. 2 years ago, she said. A villain killed them. They died protecting citizens, probably the most noble way to go. But Koda was so small. How do you even begin to explain to a child that his parents died honorable deaths? They were his entire world. Everything. This story struck a familiar chord with Izuku, thinking back to when Bruce had taken him to the warehouse for the first time. It happened quickly. First, he took my mother's pearls. Then he went for my father. 2 shots. That's all it took. 2 shots and my parents were taken from me. Izuku felt the same pang of sympathy he felt for Bruce all that time ago. The fear, sadness, and confusion of a child whose world was taken from them by the selfishness of another. To Kota, continued Mandalay. His parents left him behind, and all the while they were being praised because their sacrifice was such a noble one. He doesn't seem to like us that much either, because we're heroes like they were. I'm sure he feels stuck here because he has nowhere else to go. She leaned back in her chair. Heroes just don't make sense to Kota. In his mind, if his parents had been heroes, they would still be here. I'm sorry for your loss, said Izuku. Izuku excused himself and went back to the dorm rooms. Most of the other students had already gone to sleep, having been exhausted from the day's battle. Despite how tired he felt, Izuku found it difficult to fall asleep. He wished Bruce was here. He had a strong desire to help Kota, but didn't know how. He wasn't as strong as Bruce or as smart as him. Once again, for all his accomplishments, he still couldn't help the feeling of inadequacy creep into his heart. Aizawa woke the students at the crack of dawn, ordering them into their UA gym uniforms and to line up outside the community building. Good morning, class, he said. Today we begin a training class that will increase your strength. Our goal is to increase your skills exponentially so that each of you earns a provisional license. This will allow you to face the dangers that continue to fester in the darkness. You've had a single semester at UA, Aizawa continued, and due to your various experiences you all have definitely improved. But those improvements have mostly been limited to mental prowess and technical skill, with a slight increase in stamina thrown in along the way. But on a fundamental level, you haven't grown much stronger. That's why we're going to focus on increasing upon your strengths and powers. Aizawa's twisted smile returned, sending chills among the class. This will be so hard you'll feel like you're dying. Let's hope you all survive. Tamura Shigaraki sat at his usual spot in the hideout at Kamino Ward. He was carefully constructing a house of playing cards while he and Kurogiri waited for word from Jurin, the broker. The master is good, he said, placing another card in the tower. I tried so hard to find out where those brats were going, and he figured it out in an instant. It was worth having a team on standby then, wasn't it, Tamura Shigaraki? I guess. I only hope that idiot broker is able to procure the mercenary the master requested, said Shigaraki. Speak of the devil, said a voice from the doorway. And he shall appear. Jurin approached the bar, trademark cigarette in hand and smug smile on his face. I heard back from the union today, he continued. You can expect shipment tomorrow. It was thrown together quickly, so it might not look like much, but quality is guaranteed. And what about the master's special request? Said Shigaraki. The mercenary, said Jurin. He'll be here tomorrow as well. I must apologize for making such unreasonable requests, but it was necessary, said Kurogiri. Don't be, said Jurin. I have to say, this mercenary doesn't come cheap, but once I told him we were going after one of Batman's brats, he couldn't sign up fast enough. Besides, he added, turning to Shigaraki, the union approved of these outlandish requests because they have such high expectations of you, Shigaraki. If the League of Villains steps into the light, then the scum hiding on the sidelines will follow suit. And if that happens, it means brokers like me win big. Shigaraki turned back to his house of cards, pushing it over with his finger. The board is set with my pawns and their prey, he said, smiling perversely beneath the hand mask on his face. Finally, it's time for the game to begin. Aizawa made good on his promise. Class 1 was pushed to their breaking point, each of them tasked with a different hellish exercise designed to improve the strength of their quirks. Todoroki sat in a vat of water where he would use immense blasts of fire and ice in different intervals to regulate the temperature of the water in an effort to gain better control of his quirk. Zero was forced to continuously produce tape from his arms in an effort to increase his output proficiency and overall tensile strength of the tape. Kirishima and Ajiro were pitted against each other, sparring to simultaneously increase the strength and endurance of Kirishima's hardening quirk and Ajiro's tail. Kaminari was hooked up to a high-capacity battery while large currents of electricity passed through him, attempting to increase his ability to handle larger amounts of electricity without short-circuiting his brain. Kota was placed on the edge of the forest and forced to yell as loud as possible to increase his animal speech range and combat his shy nature. Aoyama was instructed to continuously fire his naval laser into the sky in an attempt to move past the stomach issues that arose when he overused his quirk. Takoyami was sent to one of the caves in the hillside where he would combat the unruly nature of his quirk, Dark Shadow, in pure darkness. Uraraka was put in a large bubble and pushed down the hill in an effort to get her inner ear canals used to zero gravity in an effort to combat her nausea. Ida was tasked with hardcore long-distance running to strengthen his legs and stamina. Sui was scaling an immense cliff wall while using her tongue as an anchor, allowing her to strengthen all the muscles of her body, including her tongue. Sato was lifting weights while wolfing down giant cakes and other sugary sweets that allowed him to power up his strength quirk in an attempt to increase his strength, and the duration he could use it. Next to him, Yaoyorozu was also eating large amounts of food, while continuously producing items with the lipids she got from eating. Gyro was jamming her earphones into the side of a large boulder, attempting to strengthen her ear jacks. Mina was right beside her, continuously producing acid against the same boulder in an attempt to increase her skin's durability against the acid. Minto was forced to continuously remove the sticky balls from his head as quickly as they grew in an attempt to strengthen his scalp and prevent bleeding from overuse of his quirk. Shoji and Hagakure were using their quirks on each other. Shoji would attempt to use his arms to generate multiple eyes and ears to improve his senses as he tried to hunt down Hagakure, who was improving her stealth. For Izuku, he was paired with the largest member of the wild pussycats, Tiger, a large, intense and imposing man of immense muscle. Tiger's method of training was similar to Bruce's in the sense as it was designed to completely tear you apart and build you back from the ground up. He forced Izuku to do grueling exercises before abruptly challenging him to combat. Izuku found that not only was Tiger immensely strong, but also extremely fast and nimble. Even with his training and fighting experience in the underground, Izuku was struggling to keep up with the pro hero. "Come on, shrimp," shouted Tiger as he beat Izuku into the ground. "Tear those weak muscles and make them stronger." Izuku struggled to his feet and continued sparring. Tiger was able to dodge and counter his attacks with ease, but Izuku kept fighting. He thought about Stain, the attack at the USJ, and his recent encounter with Shigaraki. In all instances, he was very lucky to have escaped with his life. Defeating the sludge villain had instilled a new confidence in him, but he still had a long way to go. If he really was a target of the League of Villains, then now, more than ever, he needed to get stronger. The students all marched back to camp at dusk, exhausted from their tortuous day of training. But their work wasn't done yet. They all had to work together to make their own dinner, as the wild pussycats had warned them they would not be preparing their meals after the first night. Ida encouraged them that it was an excellent lesson, as it was a hero's duty to care for the mental, spiritual, and physical needs of those in their care. Izuku was always impressed at how Ida was able to turn even the hardest of trials into a positive learning experience. Considering most of Izuku's classmates had never cooked a day in their life, dinner was subpar at best. But with the day they had, none of them were complaining. Izuku must have eaten his weight in bad curry that night. As he ate, he heard Mandalay calling for Kota, only for him to see the boy to ignore her and leave the building. Kota's stomach was growling, but he ignored it. He didn't want to eat. He didn't want to be around those stupid, wannabe heroes. He sat alone at the mouth of a cave at the top of the hills. He had found this the first time he came to live with Mandalay and made it his own. It was a place he came to when he wanted to be alone. His stomach growled even louder. He didn't realize how hungry he was. "I heard that," came a voice from behind him. Izukumidoriya was walking up the hill, carrying with him a bowl of curry. "I thought you might be hungry. How did you find this place?" Kota snapped. "I was trained by a detective," said Izuku. "Thought you might like some dinner before it gets cold." "Whatever, I'm just fine," said Kota. "Now get lost." "This is a nice place," said Izuku. "This your secret hideout?" Kota didn't answer. "Just go away," he said. "I don't want anything to do with your friends." "Your parents were the water hose heroes, weren't they?" said Izuku. "The ones with the water quirks. Did Mandalay tell you that?" Kota said angrily. "No," Izuku replied calmly. "I told you I was trained by a detective." "Whatever," said Kota. "Everyone here's so crazy. Calling people stupid names like hero and villain and killing each other over it. Focusing so much on their quirks." Kota turned away, looking towards the stars on the horizon. "If they hadn't been showing off, they'd still be here," he added quietly. "They?" asked Izuku. "Your parents." "Shut up," said Kota. "Just go away." Izuku sat down next to Kota. "What makes you think they were showing off?" "Because that's what everyone does," said Kota bitterly. "Isn't that why you came here, to improve your quirk?" I don't have a quirk, said Izuku. Kota looked at Izuku in surprise. What? Of course you do, everyone does. Not everyone, said Izuku. This day and age it's uncommon, but it happens. I was born this way. I don't believe you, said Kota suspiciously. Believe what you want, it's the truth, said Izuku. A long silence stretched between them, Kota's stomach continuing to growl. The curry isn't great, but it isn't bad either. You should really eat. Whatever, said Kota. I'm fine. Suit yourself. If you don't have a quirk, what are you doing here? Kota asked. Don't you need a quirk to be a hero? You have no idea how many times I've heard that in my life, said Izuku, chuckling to himself. But I grew up my entire life wanting to be a hero, hoping desperately for some miracle that I would develop a quirk. That's dumb, said Kota sourly. You're right, said Izuku. Huh? Said Kota, surprised. I said, you're right, Izuku repeated. It was dumb of me to sit and wait for a miracle to come along that would allow me to be a hero. Everyone told me it was pointless, that I should give up. Even allmight. Izuku paused. Someone I once admired more than anyone else told me to give up on my dream. And for a while, I did. So what? Said Kota. What's your point? You don't like quirks, said Izuku bluntly. I can relate to that. Maybe it's none of my business, but I learned the hard way that your quirk doesn't make you a hero or a villain. It's what you do that defines you. Kota didn't answer right away. Whatever, he said finally. Just leave me alone. Fair enough, said Izuku, turning to leave. Enjoy the curry. Kota watched Izuku walk back down the hill and out of sight. Just stop it, he thought to himself angrily, tears welling up in his eyes. You don't know what you're talking about. All of you, just stop it. I do not like this, said Himiko Toga, grumpily putting on the uncomfortable oxygen mask. It is so not cute. They were engineered for the black market from what I hear, said Mustard, the C-rank villain standing next to her. He wore a simple black school uniform, his face obscured by a large, helmeted World War II-style gas mask. You should be worried that they work, not that they look pretty. I'm just saying they could be a little more stylish, said Toga, pouting. Is that too much to ask? Hi, darlings, came a voice adjacent to them. Toga and Mustard turned to see Magni, the magnetic villain, approaching them. She was a unique individual, preferring to be referred as she despite her immense, masculine physique. Despite her friendly demeanor, she was as cruel and brutal as her quirk was powerful. Sorry to keep you waiting. Several more villains began to approach the edge of the cliff overlooking the camp below. Dabai had arrived earlier with Toga and had been awaiting the others. That makes 7 of us, he said. We still have 3 others to join our little party. The League of Villains made a mistake going after them at the USJ with a bunch of random thugs. Better to use a small group of elites. I don't care, growled Muscular, one of the villains. He was twitching like a mad dog under his black flowing cloak. Just let me loose. I'm too pumped up to stand by. Shut up, snapped Dabai. We wait and stick to the plan. First we take away their sense of peace. Soon they'll realize their lives are in our hands. Remember, they want the boy alive. He added that as if directly talking to Muscular, who simply scowled. You can do what you want with the rest of them. He's just some quirkless brat, said Muscular. How hard can it be? If you knew anything about his mentor, you wouldn't be asking that, said a voice behind him. A lone man stood away from the group, leaning against one of the forest trees. His face was obscured, but that did little to hide his imposing and foreboding presence. Everyone, shut up, said Dabai. We all know our part. For now, we wait. Darkness fell quickly after a hard day of training. The wild pussycats had promised the students a night of fun for their hard work over the past few days. They were all gathered in the woods, splitting up by class, to go through a test of courage. Class 1A would traverse a circular path through the woods while Class 1B would use their quirks in an attempt to scare them. The students were split up into pairs and sent into the woods. Izuku could already hear screams from some of his classmates as they ventured into the dark. Hey, do you smell that? Said Minta, sniffing the air. Yeah, said Pixie Bob. What is that foul stench on the air? Izuku could smell it now too. It smelled like something was burning, but far more than just a simple campfire, as if there was a fire on the mountain. The smell grew steadily worse, but it seemed to be mixed with another smell as well, a noxious odor that he didn't recognize. The screams seemed to be getting louder, as if it was more than just the students of Class 1A yelling. Izuku could feel his instincts kicking in, the same feeling he got at the USJ. Something was very wrong. Out of nowhere, a strange purple aura was glowing around Pixie Bob, and she was thrust forward as if pulled by an invisible rope. She hit the ground hard several meters ahead of the rest of the class. Izuku tried to rush to Pixie Bob's aid, but was stopped by Tiger and Mandalay. Two individuals had come out of the woods, standing over where Pixie Bob lay unconscious. One of them was tall with long hair and a masculine appearance with large round lips. The other had the appearance of a large man lizard, carrying a wide array of weapons on its back. They both smiled viciously as the first villain put their foot on Pixie Bob's head as she lay unconscious. "No way," said Minta, terrified. "I thought we would be safe here." Izuku didn't want to believe it, but he couldn't deny what was right in front of his eyes. Once again, he and his classmates would be fighting for their lives against villains. Aizawa and the others did their best to keep this location as secret as possible, so the other teachers didn't know where they were. That meant there was no hope of rescue from All Might or Batman this time. They were on their own, and there was a civilian child here as well. The thought struck Izuku like lightning. He realized for the first time that Kota was not with them. He may be out there on his own. Izuku had to find him fast. Aizawa and Vlad King had taken the remedial students from Class 1A and 1B back to the community center for their nightly extra courses. These students consisted of Kirishima, Shiro, Sato, Ashido, Kaminari, and Monoma. Aizawa realized that they had fallen behind more than he had anticipated, and they needed to up their game if they were to catch up with the others. The students weren't sparing in their indignation over the situation. "I thought Pixie Bob said we were getting a reward," complained Kirishima. "This is more like torture," said Kaminari. "For tonight's lesson we'll be talking about how to behave in an emergency," said Aizawa. "If you don't become more aware of how you're falling behind your classmates, then the gap will keep on growing. In a broad sense, this knowledge is your reward." Aizawa turned to Vlad King. "Maybe we should with practice maneuvers." "I was thinking the same thing," said Vlad. "Maybe we." "Everyone." Mandalay's voice appeared suddenly in their heads. She was using her telepathic quirk to communicate with them. Aizawa and Vlad tensed like a cat. She sounded in trouble. "Everyone be quiet," he said sharply. "Two villains attacked us," Mandalay continued. "It's possible there are more coming. Everyone, return to camp immediately, we're regrouping. Do not engage any enemies. I'll look after the other students." "Protect the students here," said Aizawa. Vlad nodded, and Aizawa dashed towards the entrance of the community center. If this was a full-scale attack like the one at the USJ, they were in big trouble. As he ran outside to the campsite, he looked in horror as the woods around them burned. "Looks like your concern has left you distracted, Eraser," said a voice next to him. Before he had a chance to react, a huge blast of blue flame engulfed him. "You pros ought to lay off," said Dabai, the source of the flames. "We didn't come here for any of you, so just stay out of our way." "How are you this evening, UA High School?" said the lizard villain. He was speaking with dramatic bravado, as if he was trying to impress them. "We are the Vanguard Action Squad of the League of Villains." "What's the League of Villains doing here?" said Ajiro. "I could crush this kitty's head so easily," said the other villain, standing over Pixie Bob. "How about it, dears?" "Should I?" "You get away from her," snarled Tiger. Now, hold on, Sister Magni," said the lizard villain. "You too, Tiger, try to be calm. When deciding if someone should live or die, we must do so by Stain's principles." "At your service," replied the lizard. He did a double take when looking at Izuku. "I knew you would be here, but I didn't expect to see you so soon. You're the one who defeated Stain. And you, Four Eyes, you were with him." He added to Ida. "This will be fun. Allow me to introduce myself, you can call me Spinner." He drew an immensely large sword from his back. It looked to be a hodgepodge mix of several swords, blades, axes, and daggers slapped together to make one big sword. It must have weighed a ton, and would be comical if the villain didn't wield it so easily. "I don't care who you are," Tiger shot back. "You're criminals, and I'm taking you down." "Students, return to camp now," said Mandalay. "We'll stay here and hold them back, don't engage anyone." Ida began shepherding the students back towards camp, but Izuku stayed put. "Midoriya," he said, "we have to get out of here." "Go on without me," said Izuku. He pulled out his grapple hook. "Mandalay, I know where Kota is. He may be in danger. I'm going after him." He grappled away before anyone could protest, and disappeared into the night. Kota sat on the cliff of his secret hideout. The conversation he had with the kid Midoriya kept playing over in his head. He didn't want to think about it, but for some reason, he couldn't shake it. Mandalay's words to him when he first arrived at the campground was playing in his mind as well. "One day, you'll see," Mandalay had said. "You'll meet someone who will show you what it means to be a hero. They will risk their life for yours, and you will know why your parents did what they did." "No such person exists," Kota said bitterly. "Heroes, villains, they're all." Kota paused, standing up as he saw the fire down below into the forest. This wasn't part of the training camp, that much he knew. He began to feel afraid. He should get back to Mandalay, warn her what's happening. Well, what have we here?" said a voice behind him. Kota turned to see a large stranger draped in a black cloak walking towards him. I came up here to get a good vantage point, and here I find someone who's not on our list. Kota turned and ran towards the trail leading towards camp, but the stranger was fast. He tore off his robe and activated his quirk. His muscle fibers seemed to sprout from his skin like plants, crawling and growing at an immense pace, increasing the stranger's size. Kota recognized that quirk immediately, images of the news report from 2 years ago flashing through his mind. The villain who killed his parents, who hadn't been caught to that day, was standing before him, and now he was about to share their fate. "We're gonna have a little fun up here, kid," said the villain, lifting his heavily muscular fist. One blow was all it was going to take, and Kota would be no more. He braced himself for the inevitable, wishing his parents were here with him. Kota heard a faint sound on the air, as if something was flying towards them at a rapid pace. The villain let out a small yelp of pain and Kota opened his eyes. 2 black objects were sticking out of the villain's arm. They looked to Kota to be like throwing stars. A second later, they began to beep, and Kota felt something lift him up and carry him away. The throwing stars in the villain's arms exploded, throwing him backward with immense force. Kota looked up to see izukumidoriya carrying him quickly away from the blast using some kind of grapple gun. "Are you okay, Kota?" said Izuku, landing a safe distance away. I'm fine," Kota stammered. "I recognize you," said the voice of the villain. He stepped out of the smoke that billowed around him, looking completely unharmed. "You're on the list. In fact, you're the guest of honor." What is he talking about? Izuku thought, then shook his head. He didn't have time to think about that. He had to get Kota out of there, but any attempt at escape would be stopped by this villain, and Kota could get hurt. He had to take care of this guy first. "Everything's gonna be okay, Kota," said Izuku. "I'm here to save you." Back at the camp, things were pandemonium. Mandalay and Tiger continued their fight with Magni and Spinner. Magni was a well-known criminal convicted of several felonies, including 3 murders and 29 attempted murders. They were formidable foes and able to match their attacks blow for blow. Mandalay was worried. Pixie Bob was still unconscious, and Ragdoll hadn't checked in. That wasn't like her. Something must have happened. Many of the other students were still in the woods. They had no idea who was unaccounted for. For all they knew, they could be dead. Kota could be dead, and Midoriya with him. They had to end this fight quickly, or the casualties would only grow higher. "Your name is Midoriya, right?" said Muscular back on the hill. "Perfect. You're the #1 target. Shigaraki wants you dead, but his boss wants us to bring you back. But he didn't say that I couldn't have a little fun tormenting you first." The muscle fibers continued to grow and accumulate across his body, allowing him to grow bigger and bigger. "Show me your blood," he shouted. The villain rushed at them with impressive speed. Izuku dodged only by the skin of his teeth. If it wasn't for his training, he would have been hit for sure. Izuku bounded over the villain and began throwing explosive batarangs at him. They may as well have been firecrackers as they popped uselessly against the villain's muscles. Despite his immense bulk, the villain did not sacrifice speed. It was all Izuku could do to keep up with him. He continued to bombard him with explosives in an attempt to find a weakness. "Is that all you've got, kid?" said Muscular. "Didn't you say everything is going to be okay? How's that working out for you?" He threw a solid punch that connected with Izuku's face, sending him careening. He could feel the blood dripping from his face as he attempted to clear his head. "Yes," shouted Muscular. "Blood is exactly what I wanted to see from you." "This isn't good," Izuku thought. "I need a plan." His mind drifted back to the Namu at the USJ. His attacks were useless against it as well. He had to outsmart this muscle-bound maniac or he and Kota were both doomed. "Don't make promises you can't keep," Hiro shouted Muscular, landing a hard kick to Izuku's torso. "You're just a fraud and you'll die that way." Muscular paused. Something had hit him in the back of the head. The boy had thrown a rock at him. "Remember the water hose heroes," said Kota, shaking. "My mom and dad. Did you torment them before you killed them?" "Those losers were your parents," said Muscular. "This must be fate. Your parents cost me an eye." He gestured to the artificial eye resting in his left socket. "This is all your fault," shouted Kota, tears flowing freely from his eyes. "Nothing in the world is right anymore and it's because of crazy people like you." "Little kids are always so quick to say it's someone else's fault," said Muscular. "I wanted to kill people, and they tried to stop me, and their death was the result. The real travesty is promising to do something you aren't able to do. And that's why your dear old mommy and daddy, Muscular reared and attempted to grab Izuku, who had jumped on the villain's back. Izuku jammed something into Muscular's eye and leapt off of him towards Kota. "Nice try with the sneak attack, but you can't." Muscular's artificial eye exploded, sending him careening backwards. Izuku had placed plastic explosives in the socket of his artificial eye. It's not about whether a hero can or can't do it, Izuku said. A hero's job is to risk their life to turn their promises into a reality. Muscular hit the ground hard, laying there motionless. Izuku turned to Koda. Are you all right, Koda? He asked. I'm fine, said Koda. Izuku had taken a few bad blows from Muscular. He was bleeding from above his eye, and his clothes were torn. We should get back to camp, Izuku said. It's not far. That was pretty good, kid. Izuku and Koda turned in shock. Muscular was standing, his muscle fibers repairing themselves around his face. He was unharmed by the blast. The only damage he had done was he destroyed the artificial eye in its socket. That's not possible, said Izuku, horrified. I was only playing before, kid, said Muscular. But now I'm gonna go all out. I don't care if they want you back alive. They didn't say you had to be in one piece. I don't care, said Muscular. I'm just glad they let me off the leash. So long as I can use my quirk as much as I want, I don't care who's calling the shots. His muscle fibers grew immensely, and he rushed Izuku with a speed that would rival All Might's. Izuku grabbed onto Koda and grappled out of the way, but Muscular was ahead of them, throwing a boulder towards them, knocking them aloft. Izuku hit the ground hard, shielding Koda from the fall. He felt a sharp pain in his side. He must have broken some of his ribs. It's like his quirk is supercharged, Izuku thought. He's been toying with me this whole time. I need a new plan. Izuku was already fatigued from their training today. If he tried to run with Koda, Muscular would be on them in a second. He didn't think he could make it back to camp. He reached into his utility belt and pulled out a radio. Muscular noticed this and ran towards him with blinding speed and grabbed Izuku's hand, radio and all, quickly breaking both the radio and his hand. Izuku yelled in pain as he felt his fingers snap beneath Muscular's grip. Muscular put his other hand around Izuku's throat, strangling him. Say goodnight, kid, said Muscular, smiling evilly. It'll all be over soon. A blast of water hit Muscular's face. He stared in confusion at Koda, who had his hands outstretched. He used his water quirk to spray him. Stop, said Koda. Let him go. Just wait your turn, kid, said Muscular. I'll get to you as soon as I'm... Izuku reached up and jammed a long, sharp object into Muscular's empty eye socket. He roared, pulling back and grabbing his face in pain. You bastard, he shouted. He struggled to get the item out of his eye socket, finally extracting it, a long syringe. He began to feel dizzy. What is this? What did you do to me? You'll see, said Midoriya. Suddenly, as if on cue, the two boys melted away, as if made of hot wax. What the hell? Shouted Muscular. How did you do that? I thought you were quirkless. This isn't a quirk, came a voice on the wind. It was Midoriya's, but he was nowhere to be found. I've simply reintroduced you to something that you have suppressed long ago. What are you talking about? Said Muscular. He could feel his heart beating faster, a foreign feeling of anxiety rising from within him. Reintroduced me to what? Fear. The world went black around him, the only source of light seemingly coming from Muscular himself. What do you mean? Said Muscular, trying to go back to his previous bravado. I'm not afraid of anything. You're afraid. You know you are. As much as you try to run, there is no escaping it. Come out, shouted Muscular. Face me and I'll show you who's afraid. Look at yourself. Muscular turned behind him. A full-length mirror had appeared out of nowhere, and what he saw in the reflection nearly made him scream. He was himself, but not himself. His muscles were gone, replaced only by a sickly thin shadow of himself. No, shouted Muscular. No, you're weak. I'm not weak. Pathetic. Stop it. Look at me. Muscular turned to see the boy Midoriya, only he had grown to at least 12 feet tall. Muscle fibers protruded from Midoriya's skin and wrapped themselves around Muscular. No, shouted Muscular. Stop. Now your strength is mine. NOOO. Muscular ran, the ground dropping out from under him. He was falling down, 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 falling forever. Finally, he hit the ground, and he fell into unconsciousness, but the fear continued, even into his dreams, and it would haunt him forever. Izuku looked over the edge of the cliff that Muscular just ran off of. This time, he was certain that he wouldn't be getting up anytime soon. Even if he did, the fear toxin would make him useless to his allies. What did you do to him? Said Koda. I just threw a little healthy fear into his diet, said Izuku. His voice was hoarse from being strangled, and his side was aching from his broken ribs, but he was otherwise okay. He knelt down next to Koda. Are you okay? I'm fine, Koda said, his tears flowing freely. Why did you risk your life? Why did you try to save me, even though you don't know me at all? Because he's a hero, boy. Izuku turned, half expecting to see Muscular returned. But it wasn't him. Someone else was coming up the mountain pathway. I almost didn't believe it, said the man. But after that display there is no doubt in my mind. You truly are a disciple of the Batman. Izuku looked at the man in horror. He was tall, wearing an orange and black combat suit, armed to the teeth with swords, a staff, guns, grenades, and various other weapons. His face was obscured by a mask, half black and half orange, with only one eye showing from the orange side. Izuku recognized him immediately from Batman's case files. Deathstroke, Izuku whispered. If he was here, then things were much worse than Izuku thought. If Aizawa had been a second slower in his reaction time, he would have been engulfed in flames. As he saw the villain in the corner of his eye, he had a split second to leap out of the way of the flames. As the blast faded, the villain taking his opponent's momentary surprise to his advantage, Aizawa used his quirk to erase the villain's flames and entangled him in his bindings. He pulled the villain upward and threw him hard against the ground. Aizawa wasted no time, leaping onto him and pinning him to the ground. "Who are you?" he snapped. "How many are with you?" "How many of whom?" said the villain snidely. Aizawa snapped the villain's arm at the elbow. He let out a loud grunt in pain, but didn't scream. "Your right arm is next," said Aizawa. "Be logical about this, and at least save your legs. It would be a real pain to have to carry you off to prison without them." "Tell me, Eraserhead," said the villain. "You worried for your students. Do you think you'll be able to save them all?" Suddenly, the villain melted into a puddle of gray sludge right before Aizawa's eyes. He leapt backward abruptly, considering what he just saw. "Mr. Aizawa." Aizawa turned to see Ida, Kota, Mainta, and Ajiro approaching him. He breathed a sigh of relief to see that they were safe. "What was that?" shouted Ajiro. "Did that guy just melt?" said Mainta. "Get inside, now," shouted Aizawa, taking off into the forest. "I'll be back." He had to get to the others quickly. If he interpreted the villain's words correctly, that meant the students were the targets this time. This meant they had no other choice available to them. Unlicensed or not, they had to fight to defend their lives. "Mandalay." Aizawa stopped in his tracks. There was a voice coming from his right. He recognized it as Mandalay's young ward, Kota. He ran in the direction of the voice until he found its source. The boy was running through the forest alone. "Kota," shouted Aizawa. "What are you doing out here?" "Mr. Aizawa," shouted Kota, running up to him. "Let's get you to safety," said Aizawa, grabbing him by the hand. But Kota stood his ground. "No," said Kota. "You have to help Midoriya." "Why? What happened?" said Aizawa, alarmed. "He stopped a villain from trying to hurt me," he said. "But now he's fighting another one. He told me to run and get to safety." "Where is he?" said Aizawa. "On the hill, on the edge of the forest," said Kota. "It's my hideout. Please, sir, you have to help him." "First, I have to get you back to camp," said Aizawa. He scooped up Kota and began to run back to Vlad King and the others at the community center. He was concerned about Midoriya, but if there was one thing he was certain of, it was that the student of Batman could take care of himself. Still, he had one ace up his sleeve. He pulled out a small communication device from one of his belt pouches and pressed it, holding it up to his ear. "Wayne." "Bruce," said Aizawa. "We have a situation." "I'm honored that you know who I am," said Deathstroke. Izuku eyed the villain cautiously. He had honored Izuku's request to let Kota go safely, and his demeanor was calm, almost friendly. Izuku wasn't fooled. The subject of a failed super soldier experiment, he was a dangerous, murderous mercenary who sold his services to the highest bidder. He was a genius-level tactician, weapons master and martial artist. Injured and fatigued from his battle with Muscular, Izuku knew he didn't stand a chance against him. Not that he had any choice. "You're surprised," said Izuku. "Not at all," said Deathstroke. "You must also know what happened the last time I faced a Robin." "I'm not Robin," said Izuku. "Perhaps not," said Deathstroke, drawing his sword. "Let's put that to the test." With lightning speed, Deathstroke lunged at Izuku, who barely had time to dodge his incoming attacks. Izuku didn't have his armor and gauntlets, so he didn't have the protection they afforded him. Deathstroke was fast and strong, and as his sword sliced through the air, he knew that if it hit him it would easily cut him down like butter. Izuku lunged back, drawing 2 batarangs from his belt and throwing them at his enemy. Deathstroke parried them effortlessly. "You'll have to do better than that," he said, kicking Izuku hard in the ribs. "Impress me, boy." Izuku gasped for air, trying to steady himself. His vision was blurred and he was struggling to stay standing. This fight was different from Muscular, who relied on sheer strength and brute force to win his battle. This man was smarter, faster, and much more skilled. Izuku changed tactics. He drew his collapsible staff from his belt, parrying Deathstroke's sword and using its momentum to carry the blade forward, allowing him to kick it out of his enemy's hand. "That's more like it," said Deathstroke, drawing his own staff. "Fight like your life depends on it." "What does the League want with me?" said Izuku, continuing to exchange blows. "It's not my business to ask questions, kid," said Deathstroke. "All I care about is the fact that losing another son will cripple Batman. I won't let that happen, said Izuku. You don't have a choice, Deathstroke shot back. Batman can't save you this time. Deathstroke drew several blades from his belt and threw them at Izuku, who felt them breeze past him as he leapt out of the way. In response, he threw several explosive batarangs, with Deathstroke avoiding each one effortlessly. The two warriors charged, locking their staves together in a struggle. Izuku was injured, and his opponent was stronger and was quickly overpowered. Deathstroke seized Izuku by the throat, slamming him against the stone cliff behind him. Izuku struggled against his captor, who threw several blows into Izuku's abdomen and face. Izuku had to get free before he lost consciousness. He drew a small pellet from his belt and threw it at their feet, smoke erupting seconds later. Slightly stunned, Deathstroke released Izuku, who seized his chance to land a kick squarely to his face. Surprising, said Deathstroke, but not good enough. He drew a machine pistol from his side and opened a burst fire through the smoke. Izuku hit the dirt, but not before a few bullets struck him in the arm and shoulder. Izuku attempted to swipe his foe's feet from under him, but Deathstroke was one step ahead, bounding over him and driving his knee hard down on Izuku's chest, pinning him to the ground. Izuku struggled against him, but with the weight of his injuries and the strength of his opponent, it was useless. You fought well, boy, under the circumstances, said Deathstroke. I'm not going to kill you, but I can't say the same for. Deathstroke paused as something wrapped around his chest and arms, restricting his movement. In a second, he was lifted off Izuku and thrown several meters away, landing hard on the ground below. Izuku recognized those bindings immediately. Get away from my student, said Aizawa, standing between Deathstroke and Izuku. Mr. Aizawa, Izuku said weakly. Midoriya, you and I are going to have a long talk about taking unnecessary risks, said Aizawa, picking Izuku up. We need to get you out of here. Behind you, shouted Izuku. A sword cut through the air where Aizawa's head used to be seconds before ducking. Without missing a beat, Aizawa landed a hard kick to Deathstroke's chest, who corrected himself seamlessly with a back handspring. Grab hold, Midoriya, said Aizawa, throwing his binding at Izuku. Grabbing tightly, Aizawa threw Izuku forward towards Deathstroke, who twisted into a spinning kick, landing squarely on Deathstroke's mask, cracking it in two and knocking the villain over. He bounded up without hesitation, reached up and discarded the broken mask, revealing the man underneath. He was older, middle-aged with white sheet hair and an eye patch over his right eye. Nice moves, said Deathstroke, drawing a second sword as Aizawa and Izuku encircled him. But don't think for a second that this fight is over. I hope your reflexes are fast enough. He pulled a pineapple grenade from his belt and tossed it at their feet. Aizawa instinctively grabbed Izuku with his bindings and threw him out of the way of the blast radius, down towards the forest area. Izuku looked back as he flew through the air only to see the explosion from where he was seconds before Aizawa threw him. He couldn't see Aizawa or Deathstroke. He was falling fast and would soon hit the ground. Twisting quickly to position himself, he hit hard against the top of an evergreen tree before falling and hitting nearly every tree branch down to the trunk, finally hitting the ground hard and losing consciousness. This is all your fault, Spinner, shouted Magni. She and Spinner were finally apprehended and subdued by Mandalay and Tiger. Stan continued to struggle against Mandalay as she pinned him to the ground and placed him in cuffs. This isn't defeat, he shouted. Stan endures. Do you hear me? His will is alive and well right here. I embody it. I will purge you degenerate heroes to avenge his name. Will you shut up already? Said Mandalay. Yes, said a voice behind her. A purple mist began to swirl around them, two yellow eyes protruding from its center. Let's move the two of you someplace more fitting. Aizawa continued his struggle against Deathstroke. The two fighters were even in fighting prowess, matching each other blow for blow. Aizawa was at a slight disadvantage, as Deathstroke did not have a quirk that he could erase. He had to rely on his fighting prowess to combat this enemy. Truth be told, said Deathstroke, ducking under a kick to his head. I've always wanted to test my strength against you. Can't say I say the same, said Aizawa, dodging a swipe from Deathstroke's sword. What do you want with my students? Your students are collateral damage, said Deathstroke. We only want Midoriya. What? Said Aizawa. Why? What do you want with him? Don't ask, don't tell, said Deathstroke. This has been enlightening, but I have to wrap this up. He swept Aizawa's legs from under him, flipping up and driving his sword into Aizawa's shoulder. Aizawa yelled in pain and tried to move, but the sword had gone through his shoulder and out the other end, pinning him to the ground. Deathstroke drew a dagger and thrust it down towards Aizawa's face. Aizawa grabbed Deathstroke's hand, struggling against the knife, but with Deathstroke's enhanced strength and Aizawa's weakened arm, he was losing the struggle. Out of nowhere, a large, heavy boot connected with Deathstroke's head, knocking him off Aizawa and several feet away. A gauntleted hand reached down and yanked the sword from Aizawa's shoulder with a swift jerk. Aizawa grunted in pain, and was then helped to his feet. "Took you long enough," said Aizawa. "Where is Midoriya?" said Batman. He pulled a syringe-like device from his belt and placed it in Aizawa's wound. A substance sprayed from the device and sealed the wound, stopping the bleeding. "Somewhere in the forest," said Aizawa. "I had to get him away from this villain." "I'll find him," said Batman, turning to leave. "There's more, Batman," said Aizawa. "It's not the other students they're after. They want Midoriya." Batman paused. Without a word, he marched over to Deathstroke, who was starting to regain his senses. "So, it looks like you did show up after all," said Deathstroke. "Shigaraki thought you." Batman stomped his heavy boot onto Deathstroke's face. "Why do they want Midoriya?" "Talk. Go to hell," said Deathstroke, his voice muffled under Batman's boot. "I will break every bone in your body, Slade," Batman growled. "The worst, if you insist." Batman seized Deathstroke's sword and plunged it into his shoulder, who screamed in agony. "You're lucky I have knowledge of human anatomy," said Batman. "But that also means that I know every location of every nerve ending you have throughout your body." "I don't know or care why they want him," said Deathstroke. "Not good enough," said Batman, driving the sword in deeper. "Shigaraki is a fool, but I don't think he's the one pulling the strings," said Deathstroke through gritted teeth. He was obviously put off by the fact Midoriya was to be brought in alive. "Someone there wants him for something, but I didn't ask questions." "How many more villains are here?" said Aizawa. "At least 10, said Deathstroke. "And then there's the monster." "What monster?" said Batman sharply. "I don't know, but it doesn't look natural," said Deathstroke. "Like some sort of abomination created in some freak's lab." "Namu," said Aizawa quietly. "Anything else?" said Batman. "Your boy is tough," said Deathstroke. "You better hope he doesn't die as easily as the last one." Batman said nothing, but thrust his knee into Deathstroke's neck, knocking him unconscious with one swift blow. "Bruce, I'm sorry," said Aizawa. "I thought this place was kept quiet." "There's no other logical explanation. There's a mole at UA. He'll be exposed soon enough," said Batman. "Right now, we have to keep the students safe. The fire from the forest prevented me from registering body signatures, but I did detect a toxic gas spreading from the center of the forest. That has to be dealt with quickly." "Why didn't the toxin spread?" said Aizawa. "It must be someone using a quirk," said Batman. "And then there's the Namu, right?" said Aizawa. "If it's anything like the Namu from the USJ, the kids won't stand a chance." "Wait," said Batman, checking his cowl vision. "The toxin has dispersed. It looks like the students are taking matters into their own hands." "Can you see them?" asked Aizawa. "Some of them," said Batman. "But there's too many unaccounted for. We have to split up and search different areas." "What about the fire?" said Aizawa. "I don't think it was their intention to use it to kill the students," said Batman. "From what I can tell, it's serving as a perimeter to keep them from escaping. The Batwing is too far out to douse it with flame retardant. For now, let's focus on the students." "Agreed," said Aizawa. "Let's go. Midoriya, wake up." Izuku drifted groggily back into consciousness. Someone was gently slapping his face, trying to rouse him. It was Shoji. He, Todoroki, and Takoyami were standing over him. "Guys," Izuku said weakly. "What happened?" "I should ask you the same thing," Todoroki said. "You dropped out of the sky and hit the ground hard. We've been trying to get you to wake up for 5 minutes." "I have to." Aizawa, As Izuku struggled to his feet, he noticed one of Shoji's hands on his dupli arms was missing, blood seeping from the wound. "Shoji, you're injured." "It's fine," said Shoji. "I can regenerate it." "What about Mr. Aizawa?" "I was attacked by 2 villains," said Izuku. "One of them I defeated, the other." The words caught in his throat. "They recruited one of Batman's rogues, a mercenary named Deathstroke, to come after me. Aizawa found me and intervened, but I got separated from them. Deathstroke dropped a grenade and Aizawa threw me out of the way. I guess that's when I hit the tree, and I don't remember much after that." "What happened with everyone else? Have you been attacked, too?" "We just faced down a deranged villain with razor teeth," said Takoyami. "He snuck up on us and cut off one of Shoji's hands." He paused, hanging his head shamefully. "I lost control of Dark Shadow. He took down the villain, but nearly cost Shoji's and my life in the process. If Todoroki hadn't come along and used his fire when he did, I don't know what might have happened." "That doesn't matter now," said Shoji. "We need to find the others." "We don't know how many villains are here," said Todoroki, "or what happened to the other students." "There's more," said Izuku. "I know the reason they are here. They're after me." "What?" said Takoyami. "Why do they want you?" "I don't know," said Izuku. "But that's what the villains told me." "Then we have get you back with the others safely," said Todoroki. "But Mr. Aizawa is in danger," said Izuku. "Mr. Aizawa would want you to be safe first and foremost," said Shoji. "And your injuries are too severe. I'm fine, said Izuku. Midoriya, please, said Todoroki. Once we've regrouped with the others, then we can form a plan. But right now, we're sitting ducks. Trust us. Izuku sighed deeply, though it pained him to do so. All right, Ochako, is your arm okay? Asui asked, concerned. I'm fine, it's just a scratch, said Uraraka. They stared at the woman standing before them. She had appeared from the woods out of nowhere. She was dressed in a school uniform they didn't recognize, wearing a mask and a large apparatus attached to her back. At first they thought she was part of the test of bravery. But then, without warning, she drew a knife and slashed Uraraka across the arm. Shallow, said the woman, inspecting the blood on the knife. Not much blood. What kind of person just slashes someone out of nowhere? Said Asui angrily. Just who do you think you are? I'm Toga, said the woman. You two are super cute, Uraraka and Asui. She pointed the knife at the two girls as she recited their names. A cold chill ran down Uraraka's spine. How does she know who we are? Maybe from the sports festival, said Asui. We don't know anything about her, so we're at a disadvantage. Stay on guard. Not enough blood, said Toga. Normally I'd suck it directly from the cut to make it flow, but there's no time. She reached back and pulled out a cylindrical metal piece connected to the apparatus on her back with a long tube. She flipped a switch on the cylinder to reveal a long, sharp needle from the end. This machine will start pumping it out as soon as I stick it in you. I'll get my fill and move on. Who's first? Toga rushed Uraraka and Asui, blade and needle at the ready. Asui instinctively wrapped her tongue around Uraraka and threw her out of harm's way. Asui barely had time to move out of the way of Toga's attack, nicking her tongue with the outstretched knife. Sue, shouted Uraraka. Are you all right? Sue, said Toga. What a cute nickname. I think I'll call you that too. Don't even think about it, said Asui, leaping away from her attacker. Only my friends can call me that. Toga launched the needle end towards Asui's direction as she leaped away, which tangled into her hair and embedded itself in a tree behind her, pinning her to it. That must mean I'm your friend too, shouted Toga, cheering happily. She got in close and put her knife on Asui's throat. Aw, you're bleeding, Sue, she said. You couldn't be more adorable. I just love blood. I know we're going to be such good friends. Get away from her, shouted Uraraka, rushing to Asui's aid. Toga turned on her heel and thrust her knife at Uraraka, who deftly dodged the knife. Pivoting and grabbing her arm, she threw Toga forward and pinned her to the ground, one knee on her back. Her training with Gunhead had paid off. Ochako, that was amazing, shouted Asui. Ochako, said Toga. You're delightful too. You've got the same smell as me. Uraraka felt the chill return. Looking into the eyes of Toga was like looking into utter madness. It frightened her immensely, but she couldn't look away. You've got a crush on someone, don't you? Said Toga slyly. So do I, and I bet you also want to be exactly like that special person, huh? At first you try to model yourself after them, but that's not enough. You realize you actually want to become that person. And once you get to that point, there's no going back. That's how love works, right? You're crazy, said Uraraka. Isn't this great, Ochako? Said Toga gleefully. Just a couple of girls talking about our crushes. Uraraka felt a sharp pain in her leg. Toga had stuck her with the needle, extracting her blood. Suck, suck, she said perversely. Suck, suck. Uraraka. A batarang came flying towards them, severing the tubing connecting the needle to the apparatus. Toga took Uraraka's momentary distraction to push her off and leap away, but not before throwing a sideways glance in Izuku's direction, then disappeared into the forest. Are you okay? Said Izuku, rushing to Uraraka's side. I'm fine, she said. But we have to stop her. It's too dangerous, said Asui. We have no idea what her quirk is. Who was that? Said Todoroki. One of the villains, said Asui. She was crazy. We can't stay here, said Shoji. We have to keep moving. Midoriya, he stopped abruptly. Izuku was gone. Midoriya, shouted Todoroki. Where did he go? He was right next to me a second ago, said Uraraka. As if on cue, laughter could be heard in the trees above them. They followed the source to find a strange man standing in the branches. He was wearing a long, tan overcoat and black top hat, his face obscured by a strange mask. He was holding a cane in one hand and 2 blue marbles in the other. A nice little trick, is it not? He said. I took the lad you're talking about with my magic. Where did you take him? Said Uraraka. Talent like his would be squandered to be cast as heroes, said the man. We'll provide him with a grander stage where he can truly shine. Todoroki threw a pillar of ice towards the villain, who leaped effortlessly to dodge it. He seemed to be able to almost float on the air. Why the aggression? He said. We merely wish to show him there are other options besides the fanatical world of heroism they're drowning in. Guys, it's not just Midoriya, said Shoji. Takoyami is gone too. He snatched 2 of our strongest classmates without a sound, thought Todoroki. If you're monologuing because you think you've beaten us, you're mistaken, he said aloud. A bad habit of mine, said the man. I was once an entertainer, you know. Taking Takoyami was a bit of improv on my part. He was able to take down our dear blade-toothed moonfish so easily and violently. I decided he should join our troupe. You bastard, said Todoroki. You won't have them. He launched more ice pillars at the villain, who continued to dodge effortlessly. Apologies, said the man. But sleight of hand and escapology are my specialties, not combat. I'm not foolish enough to fight hero candidates from UA. He lifted his hand to his ear, speaking into an earpiece. Vanguard Action Squad, I have acquired our target. Our performance has officially come to a close. Meet me at the retrieval point in the next 5 minutes for the final bow. Without another word, he dashed into the distance, hopping from treetop to treetop. Yosu Awase from Class 1B was running for his life. But not just his, for Yaoyorozu's life as well. They were ambushed by a giant green monster that Yaoyorozu identified as a Namu. She and her class had faced one back at the attack on the USJ, but this one was different. For starters, it sprouted several appendages with large chainsaws and drills on the end of them. It had been chasing after them, cutting down every tree in its path. Yaoyorozu was injured, and Awase was trying to carry her to safety, but he was getting tired, and the creature was gaining on them. As the pursuit continued, they tripped over a stray tree root and hit the ground hard. The Namu was upon them, and soon they would be cut to ribbons. A gruesome end to their hero careers before they had a chance to begin. Oh God, no, said Awase, throwing himself atop Yaoyorozu in an attempt to shield her from the monster. I'm sorry, Yaoyorozu. He closed his eyes and braced himself for the inevitable. But it never came. He heard something whiz past his ear, and opened his eyes to see the Namu had stopped, with something protruding from its chest. In a second, the object exploded and encased the creature in ice. He felt something pick him and Yaoyorozu up, and he looked up to see they were being carried away at a rapid pace by what looked like a hero, but not one he recognized from the camp. He glanced at the insignia on his chest, a bat. Realization dawned on him. This was the American hero that took Midoriya as his student. They were saved by Batman. After they reached a safe distance, he set them down. Are you all right? He said. I'm fine, said Awase. But Yaoyorozu, she's hurt. Batman bent down and began to examine her. She opened her eyes weakly. Batman, she said, trying to sit up. You really do exist. Don't move too much, said Batman, holding her down. We're going to get you to safety. Suddenly, he paused, looking back in the direction they came. The sound of the Namu's chainsaws had started up again. Awase realized, to his horror, that the Namu was free. Get her out of here, said Batman. Get back to camp. I'll take care of this. Without another word, he stood and ran towards the monster. Awase picked up Yaoyorozu and ran back towards the direction of camp, hardly believing they had barely made it out with their lives. He only hoped that Batman was as good as his legend lived up to. Meanwhile, Batman had re-engaged the Namu, who had broken free of its ice prison. He had to get in close enough to put explosive gel on its brain, but it was difficult getting past its appendages. Deftly avoiding its many drills and chainsaws, Batman attached explosives to the ends of each tendril holding them. But every time he destroyed it, it would regrow another appendage. The monster continued to press its attack, knocking over trees and destroying everything in its path. It got in close to Batman, grabbing onto him and attempting to use one of its chainsaws on him. Batman held the appendage, struggling to keep it aloft. Batman drew a batarang from his belt and used the close proximity to the Namu to stab it in its exposed brain. The monster dropped Batman and roared in pain, stumbling as it attempted to remove the batarang. Batman drew another and readied to throw it, but hesitated. The monster had suddenly stopped its attack and withdrew its appendages. It turned and began to walk away, back into the forest, as if it suddenly didn't notice Batman anymore. Batman realized that it was being recalled by its handler, and that only meant one thing: they had accomplished their mission. Midoriya. Izuku had been released from his spherical prison to find himself surrounded by several villains. He was quickly tied up and his utility belt was taken away. In an effort to secure his cooperation, the villain who had captured him had shown him the small orb that was carrying Takoyami. If Izuku tried anything, then he would die. Hi Izuku, said the girl that attacked Uraraka previously. My name is Toga. I've been thinking since I saw you. She drew a knife and held it to Izuku's throat. You would be so much cuter if you bled a little more. I could help with that. Knock it off, crazy, said the patchwork villain. Izuku heard him addressed by the others as Dabai. He was accompanied by another villain wearing a gray and black spandex suit that covered his entire body, face included. Dabai had addressed this villain as Twice, a fitting name, considering when he spoke, he seemed to talk as if he was two other people. Izuku didn't see Deathstroke, Muscular or any other villains with them. Suddenly, black and purple mist began to form around them. Izuku recognized it immediately as the warp villain from the USJ. "Welcome, Izukumidoriya," the villain said. "It has been a while since our last encounter." "I remember," said Izuku. "How's your armor doing?" "Such petulance," said the warp villain. "I hope you are more polite when you meet the master." Izuku swallowed. "So you're taking me to see All for One? Is that it?" "All in good time, Izukumidoriya," said the warp villain. "Prepare yourselves. We need to." A large pillar of ice came shooting out of the forest, entrapping the villain who had captured Izuku and Takoyami. Shouting in pain, he dropped the orb carrying Takoyami. Out from the trees came Shoji and Todoroki, charging the villains who held him captive. Izuku seized his chance, leaping to his feet. He kicked the orb carrying Takoyami towards Shoji, shouting, "Shoji, catch!" A large burst of flames erupted from the villain Dabai towards Todoroki and Shoji, burning several of Shoji's arms. Todoroki just barely managing to dodge the blast. Toga began to press her attack on Shoji, with Twice engaging Todoroki. Izuku was struggling to free himself from his bindings when something large grabbed hold of him. It was the Namu. "We have what we came for," said the warp villain. "We must leave at once." Toga and Twice fell back with Dabai, walking through the warp gate. The villain who had captured Izuku had used his quirk to free himself from his icy binding and ran through the warp gate, bowing and snapping his fingers as he left, releasing Takoyami from his prison. The Namu followed behind the other villains, carrying Izuku with him. "Midoriya," shouted Todoroki. He and Shoji ran at full speed to catch up. "No," said Izuku. "If they tried to pursue him, they would surely be killed in the process. He couldn't let that happen. Stay back." Suddenly, a small explosion like a gunshot sounded out of the forest. A grapple line came shooting forward and attached itself onto Izuku. Batman had dashed out of the forest, grapple gun in hand, and was struggling to pull Izuku free of the monster's grasp. Shoji and Todoroki seized their chance, running towards the warp gate to save their friend. They never reached him. Appearing from behind the swirling mist of the warp gate came Deathstroke, with sword in hand, and sliced the grapple line holding Izuku as if it were made of butter. The monster and Izuku vanished in the purple smoke, and Deathstroke followed behind them. Batman ran towards the gate as fast as he could, but it was too late. "Checkmate," said Deathstroke, disappearing in the mist. Batman grasped at the mist, but it was futile. The warp gate had closed. Midoriya was gone. He had failed. League of Villains. The summer training camp couldn't have been more of a disaster. Emergency services arrived just after the villains left the camp. They worked on putting out the fires and securing the area. Pixie Bob of the Pussycats was admitted to the hospital for an injury to her head caused by the villains. Ragdoll was Mia. There was evidence that she had lost a lot of blood and was presumed in critical condition, but her location was unknown. On the villain's side, 3 of their members were captured and arrested: Moonfish, Muscular, and Mustard. The other attackers managed to disappear with the warp villain. Of the 39 students, 15 were unconscious and in critical condition due to the toxic gas, while 11 others had sustained injuries. 13 of the students were physically unharmed, though the incident had taken an emotional toll, and 1 of them was missing. The media outlets had gone mad with the news, citing gross negligence on the side of UA High for endangering the students and allowing 1 of them to be kidnapped. Dozens of reporters stood outside the gates of UA, demanding them to take responsibility for such a travesty. Bruce had spent the past few days in the warehouse, going over the case files of the League of Villains. He was throwing every resource he had into finding Izuku. Dick was working with the police to canvass the city of Kamino, where Shigaraki was last located. Barbara was connected to the Justice League computer databank and the Bat computer, looking into police and city databases, city security cameras, and the underground information network to see if there was any leads on the villains who had surfaced during the attack. Bruce hadn't slept or eaten since Izuku was taken, despite Alfred's protests. "Master Bruce, you can't blame yourself for this," he said, setting a tray of food on the table next to him. "Not now, Alfred," Bruce said. "Sir, please," implored Alfred. "We are all worried for Master Midoriya, but you are no good to him if you can barely stand yourself." "Have you spoken to his mother?" asked Bruce. Alfred paused. "Yes," he said. "She is beside herself with grief. I promised her that I would keep Izuku safe," said Bruce. "I brought him into this. I am to blame. Master Bruce, please. Every second that Izuku is with them may be a second too late," said Bruce. "I was too late to save him at the training camp. I was too late to save his friend. I was too late to save Jason. I will not be too late this time." Not again. The phone on Bruce's desk rang. Detective Tsukachi, said Bruce, answering the phone. Batman, said the detective. We may have found something on the League of Villains. We need you to get down here. The training camp was meant to prepare students to handle villain attacks, said Principal Nezu. The irony is shameful. Nezu, Midnight, Present Mike, Snipe, and All Might sat around the U-shaped table in the conference room. The school was closed for the remainder of summer break. Some of the students from Class 1A and 1B were still at the hospital for their injuries. Dozens of reporters continued to gather outside the gates, demanding answers, but UA only offered silence. We knew the League would resurface, but we lacked a fundamental understanding of their plans, said Nezu. They aim to destroy Hero Society, and they've already started their war. Even if we had understood, could we really have prevented this attack? Said Midnight. They're moving pieces we didn't even know they possessed. Besides, All Might pretty much put an end to most organized crime here in Japan. We're all rusty. We've definitely gotten complacent during peaceful times without realizing it, said Present Mike. I will never forgive myself for such cowardly ignorance, said All Might shamefully. While our students were desperately fighting for their lives, I was just having a relaxing soak in the bath. We shouldn't have had the sports festival right after the USJ attack, said Snipe. We wanted to show we were still strong. To have a student kidnapped is our greatest failure as teachers. They've not only taken Midoriya, but society's faith in heroes. Every news outlet is currently condemning UA, said Nezu. But we're still not sure why Midoriya was their main target. That had been a common consensus around the room. The best they could guess was that it was because Midoriya had stood up against the League by taking down the hero killer. All Might believed it was more than that. All for One was targeting him, and he knew that he and Izuku were connected. He took Midoriya as a calling card, a message that said, I am here, and you can't stop me this time. Do you think Midoriya will join them? Asked Midnight. Never, said All Might. But who knows how long they'll try before realizing it's futile. They may kill him after that. If that happens, it will be the end of UA High, said Nezu. I think there's something that has to be voiced now, said Present Mike. We can't really deny it anymore. There's a traitor at this school. Think about what you're saying, Mike, said Midnight. I have thought about it, said Present Mike. Only the Pussycats and the teachers knew about the location. But Batman was able to show up without a problem. Batman already knew where it was, said All Might. Exactly my point, said Mike. How did he find out? Midoriya has a tracking device in his utility belt. All the teachers turned to see Batman standing in the doorway of the conference room. How long have you been standing there? Said Present Mike. Long enough, Batman replied. Wait, Midoriya has a tracker, said Snipe. Why can't we use that to find him? Because they discarded his belt when they took him, said Batman. The person behind this is no fool. He took special measures to make sure they weren't followed. Damn, said All Might. Present Mike raises a viable point, said Batman. So you think there is a traitor here, said Midnight. We can't start accusing people, said Snipe. None of us have proof that we're 100% innocent. If we start doubting each other, we'll destroy ourselves from the inside. Did you just come here only to feed our fears, Batman? Hardly, said Batman. I've come to speak with All Might. With me, said All Might, surprised. Right now. Now, confirmed Batman. All Might followed Batman out of the conference room and into the hallway. All Might cleared his throat awkwardly. Bruce, said All Might. I'm sorry about Midoriya. I promise you, we'll find him. We may already have, said Batman. What? Really? Said All Might. Tsukachi told me about a lead he found after interviewing Aizawa and Vlad King, said Batman. And I did some reconnaissance. 2 weeks ago an officer was sent around to gather information, and a bystander pointed out that he had seen a man with a patchwork face enter a building that was supposed to be vacant. The villain description didn't bring up any hits in the criminal database, so he wasn't thought to have any connection to the League. But Aizawa and Vlad described one of the villains as having a patchwork face, so we investigated further. What did you find? Asked All Might. There's a small dive bar located in the building, said Batman. We believe that this is where Midoriya is being kept. But there is also a secondary location. Another location. One of the students from Class 1A, Momoye Urazu, planted a tracking device on the Namu when she engaged it in the forest, said Batman. Tsukachi and I visited her in the hospital yesterday. She provided us with a frequency tracker and it directed us to a secondary location. After doing an orbital scan, it appears to be some sort of factory, but there are several body signatures present. We believe this is where he's keeping the Namu. My God, said All Might. How many of them are there? Hard to say, said Batman. The signatures are disappearing and reappearing randomly. We believe that they are made at a separate location and kept there for storage. but we can't be sure. What do you need me to do? Said All Might. We plan to strike tonight, said Batman. We're gathering the top heroes in the city to assist us, Endeavor, Gang Orca, Best Jeanist, all of them. Gran Torino will be there as well. When that happens, be ready. We'll need your strength. You can count on it, said All Might. We will make them pay for what they've done. Izuku was surrounded, strapped to a chair in some sort of dimly lit dive bar. Huddling around him were the villains who had escaped with him from the attack at the training camp. Shigaraki was sitting on a stool at the bar counter, staring at a television screen at the far end of the room. On it was a news report going over the events of the past few days. It would appear that the principal offenders behind the UA High training camp attack called themselves the League of Villains Vanguard Action Squad, said the reporter. The League was previously involved in the USJ attack and the Hasu incident. We still have no report from UA or local authorities as to if the whereabouts of kidnapped UA student Izukumidoriya has been located. Authorities suspect Midoriya was targeted because of his actions against the hero killer Stain in the Hasu incident. How could they have let one of their students, and a quirkless student, nonetheless, get kidnapped? Said the co-anchor. There seems to be some sort of problem with UAS upper management. Honestly, if I had a child who wanted to be a hero, there's no way I would let them go to UA. Shigaraki turned off the TV, cackling gleefully. I'm so grateful to the media for all the free publicity lately, he said. Isn't it nice, Izuku Midoriya? Maybe you should get your face out there, said Izuku spitefully. Let the public see you. All in good time, said Shigaraki. What do you want with me? Said Izuku. If you want to kill me, just get it over with. Oh, nothing would make me happier, believe me, said Shigaraki dangerously. But they want you for something else. Who? Said Izuku. As I said, all in good time, said Shigaraki. Izuku suddenly felt a wave of sickness come over him. He was dizzy, sick to his stomach. He felt a rush of vomit coming to his mouth, and he struggled to suppress it, but the effort was futile. But instead of vomit and bile, a black ooze spewed from his mouth and began to swirl around him. Izuku tried to fight, to scream, but the ooze had rendered him silent. It continued to engulf him, and soon he couldn't breathe. His mind flashed to when he was attacked by the sludge villain. Despite how far he came, how much he had grown, he felt as helpless now as he did then. Class 1 were gathered in Yaoyorozu's room at the Kamino Hospital. They had been coming to visit her, Hagakure and Gyro, who were still recovering from the incident at the training camp. The class was in a state of complete grief with Izuku's abduction. Despite being quirkless, Izuku represented a sense of strength and security in the class, one that they didn't truly realize how much they relied upon. They had lost more than a friend and comrade in arms. They had lost a brother. Without him, Class 1 felt incomplete. Uraraka was taking it the hardest. Izuku's absence had left her feeling more bereft than she ever had in her life. She had replayed the incident over and over in her head, trying to think of more that she could have done to save him. She felt helpless and frightened. I should have done something, said Uraraka, tears streaming down her cheeks. There wasn't anything you could have done more, Ochako, said Asui, attempting to comfort her. If I hadn't allowed myself to be captured, I could have stepped in, said Takoyami. That's twice in the same night that I have failed my friends. No, said Shoji. It was all we could do to survive this attack. We were fortunate that we all survived. But what about Midoriya? Said Ishido. Do you think that they'll kill him? It's unlikely, said Todoroki. The villain who captured him said that they planned on introducing other avenues for him. They most likely want him to join them. Deku never would, said Uraraka. And who knows what they'll do when they finally realize that. The class fell silent. If there was anything they were sure of, it was that Izuku was near incorruptible. But there was no way the villains would simply let him waltz out of their hideout once they discovered that as well. Then, let's go get him, said Kirishima suddenly. Several students around him gasped in collective shock. Think about it, Kirishima continued. Todoroki and I came here yesterday. Batman was here with a police officer, talking with Yaoyorozu. She said she had planted a tracking device on the Namu during their fight, and gave them the receiver to track it down. You are listening in, said Yaoyorozu. We didn't mean to, but now we're glad we did, said Todoroki. You're going to have her make you another receiver, said Ida angrily. Have the two of you lost your minds? It's not the right time for us to get involved. We have to leave this to the professionals. All I know is that at camp, I was useless, said Kirishima. I heard my friend was targeted, and I just stood by, helpless. So if I stand by and do nothing now, how am I supposed to call myself a hero or a man? What Ida said is true, said Asui. We're all shocked that Midoriya was taken from us, but we have to be rational. It doesn't matter how noble your intentions. If you go out there trying to find the bad guys, knowing you're breaking the rules, then you're acting like villains, not heroes. Midoriya would have risked it anyway, said Kirishima, turning to Yaoyorozu. He's still within our reach. With your help, we can still save him. Yaoyorozu said nothing. Ida, however, wasn't done. Listen to what I'm saying, said Ida. No, you listen, Ida. Kirishima snapped back. Don't you care about what happens to Midoriya? Don't you care that his life is in danger? Ida looked as if Kirishima had struck him. Of course I care, said Ida, trembling. I'm the class rep. I'm worried about all my classmates. But Midoriya. He paused, removing his glasses to wipe his eyes. Midoriya saved my life. Ida, said Todoroki warningly. What are you talking about? Said Ishido. The hero killer, said Ida, unable to hold back the tears anymore. He crippled my brother. I was so obsessed with revenge that I went to Hasu to try and find him. Midoriya knew I would go after him and followed me. That's why he fought the hero killer. He saved me from being murdered that day. The class stared at Ida in shocked silence. Because I didn't leave his capture to the heroes, Ida continued. Because I wanted to kill him myself, I almost lost my life to the hero killer that day. But he still came to your rescue, said Kirishima. He still came to save you, even though it meant breaking the rules, because you were in danger and he is your friend. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Kirishima stood to leave. If you've decided to help me, Yaoyorozu, meet me tonight outside the hospital. Anyone else who doesn't want to help save Midoriya better stay out of my way. Kirishima slammed the door and marched down the hallway. Kirishima, wait. Kirishima turned to see Uraraka following him. Deku saved me too. When we first met, she said after she caught up with him. He's my best friend. I have to make sure he's safe. I'm coming with you. Izuku opened his eyes, coughing and gasping for air. He looked around, trying to take in his surroundings. He was no longer in the dive bar, surrounded by villains. He was in a dark room, illuminated only by an array of computer monitors against the far wall. A large chair was placed in front of the monitors. Several medical devices and machines were placed around it. Izuku couldn't see anyone in the chair, but he knew he wasn't alone. I'm afraid I must apologize, said a voice from the chair, confirming Izuku's feeling. The effects of the warping quirk take some getting used to. Who are you? Said Izuku. Where am I? You know exactly who I am. Izuku Midoriya, said the voice. All for one, Izuku said, desperately hoping in vain that he was wrong. You are intelligent, said All for One. As expected from a student of Batman. Brainiac tells me that he is the most dangerous man on the planet. Well, present company excluded, of course. Izuku started in shock. How? You? He stammered. How do you know about Brainiac? Brainiac and his exobites, said All for One. The source of all quirks on this earth. Batman has undoubtedly told you. But did he tell you what happened after Brainiac was destroyed? Izuku didn't answer. The heroes staged a coup, said All for One. Using the powers stored by his exobites, they succeeded in wiping out Brainiac's forces. Eventually, Brainiac himself was destroyed, but he was not defeated. What are you talking about? Said Izuku. A fail-safe was enabled in his core programming, said All for One. Should he ever be destroyed, any surviving pieces of his core being would be sent throughout time and space, preventing them from being destroyed as well. So long as a single piece of his original self remains, even the smallest piece, Brainiac lives on. You said he talks to you, said Izuku slowly, the weight of what he was saying dawning on him. I recovered one of those discarded pieces 100 years ago, said All for One. As soon as I touched it, it became a part of me. It gave me strength, it gave me power. In many ways, I am Brainiac, and Brainiac is me. And now you carry on his work, said Izuku, horrified. Oh, I do much more than that, Izuku Midoriya, said All for One. I am remaking the world in Brainiac's image. A world where people like you would be a thing of the past. People like me, said Izuku. My boy, you grew up quirkless, said All for One. Watching your friends grow powers of their own around you, desperately dreaming one day that you would be given a quirk by some miracle. I'm here to make that miracle a reality. By forcing quirks onto people, said Izuku. Not everyone wants them, or even needs them. As you have demonstrated quite admirably, said All for One. Considering the fact that you even refused my dear old brother's quirk, the quirk of true, unbridled power, and you even brought the hero killer Stain, and the sludge monster that killed your friend, to justice. And all without a quirk. I have to say, you have impressed me, Izuku Midoriya. You truly are a champion of justice. What do you want with me? Said Izuku. I have big plans for you, Izuku Midoriya, said All for One. You are going to help me destroy the symbol of peace. You, All Might's would-be successor, will be his ultimate downfall. I would rather die, said Izuku. That would be wasteful and unfortunate, said All for One. Did you know that it takes several days after the body dies for the quirk to die with them? I have many friends in high and low places. When someone with a powerful quirk dies, I usually make arrangements to have the body brought here so I can assimilate their power. After all, who is going to report a quirk stolen from a corpse? Izuku felt sick to his stomach. You're a monster. Come now, izukumidoriya. Is that any way to speak to someone who is about to give you a gift? What are you talking about? As I said All for One. It is my mission, my calling, to make the dream of bringing quirks to everyone a reality. Starting with you. He stood from the chair and turned to Izuku, who let out a silent gasp. He had no eyes, nose, or face for that matter above his mouth. Gnarled, scarred skin stretched up over his nose, eyes, and bald head. Several tubes and spouts stuck out from his face and neck. The grotesque mannequin who was his enemy walked towards him. Izuku struggled fruitlessly against his chair as All for One placed his outstretched hand over his eyes. Prepare yourself, Izukumidoriya, said All for One. This process can be rather uncomfortable. Izuku may as well have been in space for all he knew. For over the next several hours, no one could hear his screams. All for One, Uraraka, Kirishima, Todoroki, Ida and Yaoyorozu all sat on the train bound for Kamino Ward. Yaoyorozu had decided to accompany them on their suicide mission. Ida had met them outside the hospital in an attempt to stop them. When he realized his efforts were futile, they had to swear to him, on their lives, that they were going to try to rescue Midoriya through non-violent means, and he had accompanied them to keep them to their word. The coordinates indicate Kamino Ward, said Yaoyorozu. We should be there in about 15 minutes at 10 o'clock. Does the rest of the class know what we're doing? Asked Uraraka. Yes, said Todoroki. They tried their best to talk us out of it. Asui was the most against it, said Kirishima. Todoroki suddenly looked uncomfortable. Just to be sure, he said. We're going against everyone's wishes and being completely selfish by doing this. We can call this off if we want. Midoriya wouldn't think twice about coming to our rescue if it was one of us, said Kirishima. He was trained by Batman, said Yaoyorozu. We all know that from the moment we met him, he was already miles ahead of us, quirkless or no. But Kirishima is right, said Uraraka. Izuku stepped in to save me when I first met him, before his training. As long as I have known him, he has always been there for those in need, no matter what. He has done so much for us, and has saved us all in one way or another. We owe him that. All right then, said Todoroki. Yaoyorozu leaned back in her seat, sighing. A rescue without fighting, she thought to herself. It's not plausible. The others are so driven by frustration that they're blinded. She was hoping that once they saw the situation firsthand and realized how difficult the situation was, they would come to their senses and let the pros handle it. Aizawa, Principal Nezu, and Vlad King all stood before a swarm of reporters. UA had finally agreed to hold a press conference to discuss the events of the training camp. Aizawa knew they were being led into the conference like lambs to slaughter, and it would be a veritable bloodbath. We are here to apologize, said Aizawa. A recent incident allowed harm to come to 26 first-year heroes, and we staff were ill-prepared. We take responsibility for any trauma caused by our negligence. It is our duty to train heroes, but also our duty to protect heroes in training. I'll take the first question, said a reporter. Since the beginning of the year, UA students have had 4 encounters with villains. This time there were students who were gravely injured, and 1 unaccounted for. How did you explain this to their families? And what are some of the specific steps you're taking to ensure their safety in the future? Aizawa had a feeling this would be the first question. The media already knew their basic position since they didn't cancel the sports festival. They were trying to make them look bad. In their eyes, the heroes had become the villains. We will increase patrols and review security measures within the school, said Nezu. This includes state-of-the-art security systems, an increased security presence, and a complete overhaul of security procedures. We have already received a generous donation from the Martha Wayne Foundation for such increases to be possible. The safety of UAS students is, and always has been, our main priority. Make no mistake about it. You speak about keeping the children safe, Eraserhead, said another reporter. But according to our information, you encourage them to fight during the training camp, putting them in grave danger. Can you explain your actions? The students were already in grave danger, said Aizawa. I was informed by one of the attackers that the students themselves were the targets, and I concluded that because we didn't know the full scale of the attack at the time, allowing them to use their quirks would help avoid the worst possible outcome. Do you think 25 victims and 1 kidnapped child counts as a win for UA? Said the reporter. I assure you that things could have gone much more poorly, said Aizawa. I feared every student would be tortured and killed in the end. Most of the victims were harmed by the gas attack, said Nezu. It was later determined to be the result of a poisonous quirk used by one of the villains. Because of the quick actions of two of our students, Ms. Kendo and Mr. Testu, injuries from that quirk were kept to a bare minimum. We are also providing psychological counseling for every student, but at the moment do not see any signs of psychological trauma. So you have found a bright spot to this tragedy, said the reporter. We are relieved that an entire class of burgeoning heroes still has a future, replied Nezu. Can you say the same for the abducted, izukumidoriya? Said the reporter. Aizawa flinched slightly at the mention of Izuku's name. The boy is the first quirkless student to be admitted to UA High, the reporter continued. But despite this, he has demonstrated considerable strength, intelligence, and ability enough to earn him second place in the UA Sports Festival. What would be the reason they would target and abduct this student? Or perhaps it was because of his actions against the hero Killer Stain, a known associate of the League of Villains. It would be foolish of us to try and speculate why he was abducted, said Aizawa. Really, said the reporter. Or do you think it is because he was trained by the notorious American vigilante Batman? I fail to see your point, Aizawa shot back. Then let me enlighten you, said the reporter. Batman has a history of using extreme methods when apprehending criminals and villains, oftentimes utilizing pain and torture to achieve his goals. According to our sources, this isn't the first time he has lost a student to villains, his last protege being tortured and killed by the notorious criminal and, I quote, clown prince of crime, the Joker. Is it a customary practice to consort with unlicensed vigilantes? Perhaps they are brainwashing him right now, attempting to sway him to the side of villainy. And considering how Batman's last student turned out, and how history seems to be repeating itself with young Izukumidoriya, how can you say that he still has a future? Flad King swallowed. This reporter knew what he was doing. He was baiting Aizawa into saying something damning for UA High. Already he could almost see the veins pulsating in Aizawa's neck. He was getting agitated. Whatever he said next could make or break UA High. Much to his relief, Aizawa stood and bowed to the reporters politely. Ever since I met Izukumidoriya, I have been amazed time and time again for his sheer, unhindered ability, said Aizawa calmly. Despite being thrown aside by society as a weakling, it was through his sheer determination, intelligence, strength, and most importantly, his convictions and indomitable resolve to become a hero that he was able to accomplish so much. And what's more, he is striving to become a hero the right way, attending school and becoming licensed, something that has been supported and encouraged by his so-called vigilante sponsor. So in answer to your question, yes, I do believe that he has a future as a hero. The reporters continued to drill their questions into the UA staff, every one more scathing than the last. Aizawa could feel it, the mood was changing. People were beginning to resent heroes. If they didn't do something about it, it would only get worse. Isn't it that strange? Said Shigaraki, turning off the press conference. The heroes are becoming the bad guys. Seems like they're not dealing with this very well at all. Shigaraki and the rest of the League of Villains, consisting of Magni, Twice, Dabai, Spinner, Toga, Mr. Compress and Kurogiri, were all watching the press conference back at their hideout in Kamino Ward. They were all gathered around Midoriya, heavily chained to a large medical stretcher, a vacant expression on his face. The master had spent hours with Midoriya and had finally finished his work on him. He then had tasked the League with the final step of his conversion, turning him against heroes. So much criticism, Shigaraki continued gleefully. But everyone makes a mistake or two, right? It's not like they're supposed to be perfect. Modern-day heroes sure have it rough, don't they, Midoriya? Once a hero receives payment for saving someone, they aren't a hero anymore, said Spinner. A hero in this current system only cares about money and glory, said Shigaraki. And since society buys into those idiotic rules, anyone deemed a loser is shoved aside. You should know that more than anyone. Born quirkless, weak and pathetic, everyone wrote you off. But you showed them you were strong. You rubbed it in their arrogant faces. Now, you have a chance to make anyone who's ever doubted you pay. Shigaraki stood and walked towards the catatonic Izuku, leaning over him. Tell me, Izukumidoriya, he said quietly. Who was it who doubted you? Who is your enemy? Izuku's eyes widened at the question, his face contorting as if in pain. All-might, he whispered. Shigaraki giggled gleefully. Their plan was set in motion. Soon, the symbol of peace would be dead, slain at the hands of his would-be successor, and there was nothing he could do. There was a knock at the door. Hello, said a voice from the other side. I'm here to deliver a pizza. 6 minutes earlier, Batman gathered outside the dive bar in Kamino Ward, surrounded by an army of police and several pro-heroes, including Nightwing, Endeavor, Kamui Woods, Edgeshot, Gran Torino, and even All Might himself. Several other heroes and officers were stationed at the secondary location that was provided to them by Yaoyorozu, where the Namu were held. Now was the time they took down the League of Villains in a preemptive strike. Midoriya is in there, said Batman, using his cowl vision. He's restrained and surrounded by several villains. We need to act fast, said All Might. I'll smash down the wall and then... No, said Batman. I need to go in there alone. Excuse me, said All Might. Batman, I know you're used to operating alone, but that's suicide. If too many of us get in there at once, Midoriya might be injured, Batman replied. I just need 5 minutes, and I'll signal you to move in. Now wait a moment, Vigilante, said Endeavor indignantly. He may be your student, but you can't just dictate how this operation. Simmer down, Todoroki, said Gran Torino. I suggest you let the man work. He knows what he's doing. Endeavor scoffed, but said nothing. 5 minutes, said All Might. 5 minutes, confirmed Batman. But I need you to distract them. How? Said Tsukachi. Think of something, said Batman. With that, he pulled out his grapple gun and grappled away. The League of Villains were staring at the door in utter confusion. Not a word spoken between them. Suddenly, a small orb rolled from under the door and across the floor, drawing everyone's attention. What the hell is that? Said Dabai. Realization struck Shigaraki and he rushed to destroy the orb. But it was too late. The orb exploded in a large flash, and smoke filled the room. The villains were in an uproar. Shigaraki's eyes and lungs stung from the smoke, grasping outward as he tried to steady himself. Kurogiri, he shouted, coughing. Kurogiri, get us out of here. There was a loud crashing sound, followed by a scream. It was Kurogiri's voice. He opened his eyes, though it pained him to do so, and saw a large, black figure moving at blinding speed between his comrades. After a moment of confusion, his heart sank when he recognized it. Batman, he shouted. Batman is here. The Batman wasted no time, swiftly moving through and incapacitating the villains around him. Dabai had regained his senses and attempted to use his fire on him, but Batman deftly sidestepped him, grabbing his outstretched arm and throwing him to the ground. With a sickening twist, Dabai's arm snapped like a dry twig. His angry yell in pain was cut short as Batman stomped his boot into his neck, knocking him unconscious. Mr. Compress attempted to use his quirk to capture the invader, but Batman was too quick, picking up a bar stool and throwing it hard into Compress's face, destroying his mask and knocking him unconscious. Toga drew her knives and began attacking Batman, who grabbed her by both hands and threw her against the wall, knocking the wind out of her before handcuffing her to one of the tables. Twice used the blades concealed in his gauntlets and attempted to attack Batman, who simply threw a small device, which attached to his chest, only for it to explode and encase him in a glue-like substance. Magni rushed Batman and began throwing powerful punches and kicks, which Batman blocked and parried easily before Batman threw a powerful punch into her abdomen. Doubling over, Batman grabbed her by the head and swiftly kneed her in the face, knocking her out with a sickening crack. Spinner attempted to come to Magna's aid, but Batman was 2 steps ahead of him, throwing 2 bolas towards him, which wrapped around his arms, legs, and torso, restricting his movements before Batman delivered a kick directly to his face, knocking him to the ground. Shigaraki looked desperately for Kurogiri. He found him behind the bar. He had a device on his armor that was sending an electric current through his body, inhibiting his quirk. Shigaraki reached for the device to destroy it, but something grabbed him from behind. Lifting him and throwing him to the wall, Batman wrapped his large gauntleted hand around Shigaraki's throat. He reached up to use his quirk on Batman's arm, but Batman stabbed his hand with a batarang and pinned it to the wall behind him, then grabbed Shigaraki's other arm at the wrist with his free hand. Now, All Might, said Batman. The wall behind them exploded, with the large, empowered All Might breaking through. He stared at his surroundings with surprise and awe. Save some for the rest of us, Batman, said All Might. Check Midoriya, said Batman, motioning in Izuku's direction. Right, said All Might. As he approached Izuku's side, the rest of the heroes piled in and surrounded the remaining villains. All Might removed the restraints on Izuku and examined him. He was catatonic, staring blankly at the ceiling before him, but was breathing steadily. He snapped his fingers, but Izuku didn't react. Batman, he needs to get to a hospital now, shouted All Might. What did you do to him? Growled Batman at Shigaraki. I don't know what you're talking about, Shigaraki said, sneering. Batman twisted his hand holding Shigaraki's wrist, hyperextending it. Shigaraki yelled in pain. Lie to me again, and I won't just break your hand, I will remove it from the wrist, said Batman. Batman, said Kamui Woods, surprised. Quiet, Woods, said Gran Torino. We don't have time for this, said All Might. Let's get Midoriya out of. All Might. All Might turned back to Midoriya. He was looking right at him. Midoriya, he said. Thank God. Yes, I am here. Everything is going. Izuku lifted his hand to All Might's face, and an enormous explosion emitted from his palm, sending the symbol of peace flying through the open wall and into the window of another building. Izuku, shouted Batman. Izuku stood and positioned his hands behind him. Explosive blasts emitted from them again, propelling in the direction he sent All Might. He has a quirk, Batman thought, horrified. All for One gave him a quirk. He turned back to Shigaraki, who was laughing mirthlessly at Izuku's actions. Batman snapped his wrist, causing Shigaraki to yell out in pain again. Why is he attacking All Might? Shouted Batman. What did All for One do to him? Isn't it obvious, Batman? Said Shigaraki. He gave him power. True power. Where is All for One hiding? Said Gran Torino. Just you wait, said Shigaraki. The game is still mine. Out of nowhere, several large globs of black and gray goo appeared around them. Several large creatures began to emerge from them, attacking the heroes. Namu, shouted Kamui Woods. Where did they come from? I thought the others were taking care of them. The bar was in uproar as the Namu attacked. Outside the bar, Endeavor and the officers were defending themselves as more Namu began to pile out of the warp gates around them. Damn it, Edge shot, shouted Gran Torino. Get control of Kurogiri. Kurogiri is incapacitated, shouted Edge shot. This isn't his doing. The black warp gates began to form around the villains, one by one disappearing from the bar. Stop them, shouted Gran Torino. It was too late. The villains had disappeared, leaving the Namu in their place. It has to be All for One, shouted Batman, fending off two Namu at once. This was bad. Every second he was fighting these monsters, Midoriya was out there fighting All Might. He had to get to him, restrain him and get him help. He would not lose another student. No, it was more than that. He would not lose another son. Not now, not ever. Uraraka, Ida, Todoroki, Kirishima and Yaoyorozu were looking over a gate towards the large groups of heroes and police. The tracking beacon had led them to a large warehouse, where they guessed was the secondary location that Batman had mentioned to the detective when Yaoyorozu had provided them with the original tracking beacon. Gang Orca and Mount Lady are here, said Kirishima. So is Best Jeanist and Tiger. All the heroes and police had arrived at the location just before them. Mount Lady had stomped the roof of the warehouse in and collapsed the building. The police and the rest of the heroes were able to storm in and apprehend everyone inside. To their horror, the building was filled with Namu. Look, said Uraraka. They found Ragdoll. Tiger had pulled a catatonic Ragdoll out of the wreckage. She appeared to be breathing and in good condition, but was unresponsive to attempts to wake her. I guess there was nothing to worry about after all, said Todoroki. Right, said Ida. We should get out of here quickly before. Uraraka gasped, staring at the building. Someone else was emerging from the wreckage. He was tall, wearing a black suit. His face was obscured by a black mask and large, strange neck brace that extended to his shoulders. To Uraraka, he looked more machine than man. I'm sorry, Tiger, said the man. The Ragdoll's quirk was just too powerful. I had to take it. How could I not? Instinctively, Best Jeanist used his quirk on the man, binding him tightly to restrict his movements. A red electrical energy passed through the man and the bindings were broken, sending Best Jeanist and the other pros flying in the other direction. The students gasped in horror. Quick thinking, said the man. Consider me impressed. Best Jeanist rallied and attempted to attack the man, but he threw a blast towards Best Jeanist, striking him in the abdomen. Blood seeped from the wound as he collapsed in a heap. I see, the man continued. Your quirk comes from practice and experience. I don't need it after all. It wouldn't pair well with Tamura's disposition. Who is this guy? Said Todoroki. What just happened? He took out the pros in an instant, said Kirishima, terrified. We have to run, said Yaoyorozu. Wait, said Uraraka, pointing upward. Look. They all looked to see a large figure cratering downward at an impressive speed, hitting the ground like a meteorite. A smaller figure was flying towards it, fire emitting from its outstretched hands. Uraraka gasped in shock. It's Deku, she said, horrified. No, said Ida. It can't be. It is, said Kirishima. And he's using a quirk. How is that possible? Said Yaoyorozu. Look at the crater, said Todoroki. It's All Might. Sure enough, All Might was lying face down in the crater before them. He wasn't moving, and they weren't sure if he was dead or unconscious, but they shuddered to think of the possibility. Several black and gray blobs opened up around him and the villains from the training camp all dropped out of them. They were beaten badly and some of them were unconscious. Tamura Shigaraki kneeled before the man. Master, said Shigaraki. It looks like you failed again, Tamura Shigaraki, said the master. But do not let that discourage you. You'll try again. That's why I brought your associates back with you, even young Midoriya. It's apparent that the quirk and conditioning worked perfectly. Did you hear that? Said Uraraka. They did something to Deku. The boy will be a great asset to you, continued the master. Start over as many times as it takes. All of this is for you. He turned to face All Might, who was finally staggering to his feet. Ah, there you are. In an instant, All Might was upon the man. He seemed to match All Might's strength equally, blocking All Might's Detroit smash. The sheer force of power from both combatants rocked the very ground beneath them. I'll have you return my student, all for one, shouted All Might. Have you come to kill me a second time, All Might? Said All for One smugly. With immense force, the thrust forward and threw All Might back, flying into the building behind him. You've gotten weaker, All Might. You're one to talk, said All Might, emerging from the building. It's hard to ignore that fancy life support mask you have on. I won't make the same mistake I made all those years ago. I will take young Midoriya back and make sure you're locked up for the rest of your sad life. But All Might, the boy doesn't want to leave, said All for One, placing a hand on Izuku. Tell him, young Midoriya, who is your enemy? All Might, said Izuku. Young Midoriya, said All Might. What have they done to you? I've simply given him what he's always wanted, said All for One. His friend had such a powerful quirk, and the dead have no use for such power. You mean young Bakugou, said All Might, horrified. You gave him Bakugou's quirk. His quirk and then some, said All for One. I've done a little tweaking and enhanced its abilities. He should be strong enough to stand up to someone even as powerful as you. Go ahead, young hero, he added to Izuku. Complete your mission. Izuku used his explosive quirk and launched himself at All Might with blinding speed. He only had a moment to block before another blast launched him through several buildings. Izuku didn't let up, following him through the wreckage, continuing the fight. Now that that's taken care of, it's time to get you out of here, said All for One. He raised his hand to the unconscious Kurogiri and jagged black and red tendrils extended from his fingers, embedding themselves into Kurogiri. In a second, a large warp gate appeared behind them. Quirk activation, said All for One. Comes in handy. Now, get out of here, Tamura. But what about you? Asked Shigaraki. There remains much room for you to grow, said All for One. But only without me will you find your way to do so. Master, said Shigaraki. Let's go, Shigaraki, said Mr. Compress, compressing an unconscious Dabai into a small orb and pocketing him. While our masked lead keeps All Might entertained Og. There was a large explosion. Shigaraki turned towards Compress as he hit the ground, doubled over in pain. More shots rang out as his compatriots did the same. All for One suddenly reached in front of Shigaraki's face and snatched something out of the air, opening his hand to reveal a large rubber bullet. The engine of the Batmobile roared as it pulled into the wreckage, a large figure launching out of the cockpit. It was Batman, but instead of his traditional hero suit, he was covered head to toe in a heavy, black mechanical suit. It was made from what looked to be reinforced carbon steel, the visor for its eyes and bat insignia glowing deep and powerful red. Giant black wings extended from its back, and it was armed to the teeth with various tools and weapons. The Hellbat. Batman, said All for One. I was hoping you would show up. All for One, said Baman, his voice projecting out of the Hellbat's speakers. I'm very pleased that you know me, said All for One. Brainiac speaks very highly of you. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Can't say I feel the same, said Batman. HMPH, scoffed All for One. You're as impertinent as your reputation precedes. He looked him up and down. Nice suit. But do you really think you stand a chance against me in that tin can of yours? It was made for something a lot stronger than you, said Batman. I highly doubt that, said All for One. Nothing is stronger than me. Then prove it, Batman snarled. Shut up and fight. All Might and Izuku continued their fight throughout the city. His new quirk was powerful, extremely powerful. It was all Might could do to defend himself against the explosions, but he couldn't fight back, or Midoriya could be injured or killed. This was bad. Young Midoriya, said All Might. You have to snap out of it. Izuku said nothing, pressing the attack. All Might had to get through to him somehow. Think of your training, he said. Remember what Batman taught you. You're stronger than this. Izuku threw a huge explosive blast, enveloping All Might and sending him careening into the building behind him. All Might's mind was racing. Continuing to fight Midoriya would deplete his already limited time, and once he was defenseless, he would be helpless to Midoriya's attacks. Exactly what All for One wants. He had to keep trying to reach him, and he may have a way. Izuku leaped through the opening of the building, continuing his attack. young Midoriya, he said. Izuku continued to advance on him. Izuku, Deku, stop. Izuku froze, pondering All Might. Holy shit, that worked, All Might thought. He cleared his throat and continued. I know you hate me. You have every reason to. You are my enemy, said Izuku, walking towards him, his hands sparking. I am not your enemy, Deku, said All Might, holding his hands up. And I don't want to fight you. Your real enemy is back at that factory. Too late, said Izuku. It's not too late, said All Might. We can fix what he's done. You have to trust me. Trust? Izuku said, cocking his head. Please, Deku, said All Might, daring to step closer. Not a day goes by that I don't regret what I said to you on that rooftop. You have always had what is in you to be a hero. No, more than that. Right here, right now, you are a hero. Hero, said Izuku. Yes, young Midoriya, said All Might. He knelt down and wrapped his arms around Izuku. You are a hero. You always have been, even if I didn't see it. Now please, be the hero I know you are and come back to us. Please. All Might, said Izuku. In his mind images flashed of when he was a child. He remembered he and Kaken watching the news broadcasts of All Might taking down villains. He remembered how inspired he was, how hopeless he felt when he was told he didn't have a quirk. How destroyed he was back on the rooftop, the hope he felt when he met Batman that night at his house. He jumped back, grabbing his head and shouting as if in pain. Izuku, said All Might, startled. Izuku, what's wrong? His fault, said Izuku. This is his fault. I hate him. I hate him. Without warning, Izuku leaped out of the building and flew off into the distance. He's going after All for One, said All Might. He's going to get himself killed. All for One continued his fight with Batman, picking him up and throwing him against the side of a building. Batman rallied, using the enhanced strength of his suit to throw heavy blows on his enemy. They were ultimately fruitless, as All for One parried and blocked them. His quirks seemed to be endless and Batman's armor was powerful, but far from indestructible. Batman pressed a button on his gauntlet, and the railgun from the Batmobile sprang to life, firing on All for One. He was thrown backward into the rubble. Uraraka and her friends watched in horror as All for One re-emerged, his suit a little damaged but otherwise still walking. The tendrils shot out from his extended fingers again, embedding them in Batman's armor. With a great heave, he threw Batman into the building adjacent to him. There's no way he's going to beat him, said Kirishima. We have to get out of here, said Iida. But what about Deku? Said Uraraka. He's not here anymore, said Iida. He flew off with All Might. No, look, said Todoroki, pointing to the sky. Flying at breakneck speeds, Izuku came barreling down from the sky towards All for One, using both his hands to unleash a massive explosion directly on him. All for One emerged from the wreckage, his mask damaged and revealing a charred face with no eyes underneath. How are we going to get him away? Said Kirishima. This is crazy. As if on cue, the Batmobile roared to life and sped over towards the students, stopping in front of the gate where they were hiding. I know you're here to rescue Midoriya, said a projected voice from the car. It was Batman, controlling it remotely. Get in the car. Now, Izuku didn't let up the attack, throwing blast after blast at All for One, getting closer to his target with each one. This is your fault, he shouted. You did this to me. I gave you a gift, you ungrateful whelp, said All for One, grabbing Izuku by the throat and placing his other hand over his eyes. And I can take it away just as easily. It's clear that I was wrong about you. You'll never be anything but a quirkless weak. He let go of Izuku as something large came flying into his peripheral vision, knocking him away from Izuku. Batman was back, pinning All for One against the wall of the wrecked building, hammering him in his exposed face with heavy blows. You won't touch him again, he said between blows. All for One caught Batman's fist in his hand and kicked him away. Batman landed next to Midoriya, correcting himself. Batman, Izuku said. You're here. His suit was heavily damaged, and his face was exposed slightly from the broken mask. You need to get out of here, Midoriya, said Batman. Your friends are waiting for you. What? Said Izuku. Where? Off in the distance, he heard the roar of the Batmobile's engines. The car was driving towards the wreckage. Picking up speed, it made its way towards a billboard propped up by an upended car. Using it as a makeshift ramp, the car flew through the air over them. Leaning out of the cockpit of the car, Izuku saw Uraraka extending her outstretched hand towards him. Izuku realized that she was using her quirk to make the Batmobile light enough to float. Now, Midoriya, shouted Batman. Go. You're not going anywhere, shouted Shigaraki, running towards Izuku. It was as if the world began to slow down for Izuku, despite the chaos around him. With a split-second reaction time, he used his new explosive quirk to propel him towards the car, grabbing onto Uraraka's hand. Several more hands sprouted from the cockpit, the hands of his friends, pulling him into the car. The Batmobile landed and drove off into the distance. "Well," said All for One as the students drove away. "That's that." He turned back to Batman. "Your suit is far too damaged. As much as it pains me, I will have to kill you. Still, it was rather foolish of you to think that you could defeat me." "I wasn't trying to," said Batman. "What?" said All for One. Suddenly, a yellow and blue flash flew towards All for One. All Might landed a solid punch on his enemy, causing him to fly backward. "Now that young Midoriya is gone, I don't have to hold back anymore," said All Might. "Thanks for warming him up for me, Bats." "Master, no." Shigaraki began to run towards his fallen master when another yellow blur knocked him backwards. It was Gran Torino. "You're slow, old man," said All Might. "You're just too fast," Gran Torino shot back. All for One emerged from the wreckage once again. His mask and suit was badly damaged. "It appears we're outnumbered," he said. "Time for you to go, Tamura." He extended the tendrils in his hand again, this time activating Magna's magnetism quirk, causing the unconscious villains to be magnetically propelled into Kurogiri's warp gate. "No, master," shouted Shigaraki, fighting against the magnetism. "Your body is too damaged." No, unable to hold back the force of the magnetism, he was propelled backward into the warp gate and disappeared. All Might and All for One continued to trade blows. As the explosive battle raged around them, several heroes and emergency service workers were attempting to evacuate the area before more civilians got hurt. "You can't win, All for One," said All Might. "I only came to rescue Tamura," said All for One. "But killing you is an added bonus. In the past, your fists crushed one after another of my comrades. Many were forced into hiding underground, while you were extolled as the symbol of peace. What a grand view you must have had from atop our sacrifices." "You shut up," said All Might, "always toying with people, probing their weaknesses. You steal, break, manipulate and discard them, just like you did to Midoriya. You scoff at innocent people who are just trying to lead happy lives. It cannot continue. I won't let it." All Might grabbed All for One by the arm and delivered a powerful Detroit smash into his face, sending him cratering into the ground below. Gran Torino looked at him in shock. Half of All Might's body was reduced to his depowered form. "Tashinori," he thought, "you've reached your limit." Down in the crater below All Might's fist, All for One began to laugh. "You seem rather upset, All Might," he said, grabbing All Might's fist and prying him off him. "I've heard the words you've spoken before, from your master, Nana Shinura." All Might gasped at the mention of his master's name. All for One seized his chance and kicked All Might off him. "My master was a true hero," said All Might, collecting himself. "Keep her out of it. The way she died was so pathetic," said All for One. "As the creator of One for All, it was shameful for me to see her inherit such power. Shall I tell you all about how she met her end?" "Shut up, Tashinori, calm down," shouted Gran Torino. "He's trying to distract you, just like last time. Don't let him get under your skin. It's time to do or die and go past your limits." Uraraka, Izuku, Todoroki, Ida, Kirishima, and Yaoyorozu continued to sit in the Batmobile as it drove off. It hadn't stopped since they left Kamino Ward. "Where is this thing taking us?" said Todoroki. "Back to the warehouse," said Izuku. "What's the warehouse?" said Uraraka. "It's Batman's base of operations in Japan," said Izuku. "Where he trained me." Izuku suddenly felt dizzy. The adrenaline from the event was wearing off, and he was starting to feel what he assumed were the after effects of what All for One did to him. "Are you all right, Midoriya?" said Todoroki. "I'm fine," Izuku lied. "We're here." The false wall leading to the warehouse in the Wayne building opened up, and the Batmobile drove through. Finally stopping, the cockpit opened up and they all piled out, Izuku's classmates looking around them in awe. "Look at this place," said Kirishima. "This is so cool." Izuku turned to see Alfred running towards him, Barbara wheeling along in tow. Alfred threw his arms around Izuku in a tight embrace, a display of affection Izuku was unfamiliar with when it came to the butler. "Forgive me, Master Midoriya," said Alfred, breaking away. "You had us so worried." "We're glad you're safe," said Barbara. She looked over to the others standing behind him. "Your friends?" "Yes," Izuku said. "They saved me." Realization suddenly dawned on him. "Batman and All Might. They're fighting All for One." "We know," said Barbara, wheeling over to the conference table. She pulled up the holographic feed of the live newscast of the fight. "That's All Might," said Yaoyorozu, shocked. "He looks like he's in rough shape," said Todoroki. "We have to help them," said Izuku. "You'll do no such thing," said Alfred sharply. "It's bad enough that you're not at a hospital right now. Your presence there would only make things worse." "He's right, Izuku," said Barbara. "But we have to do something," said Izuku. "Where are the other heroes?" "They're busy fighting the remaining Namu," said Barbara. "I'm sorry, Izuku," said Alfred. But the only thing we can do right now is trust in Master Yagi to finish what he started. Izuku stared fearfully at the newsfeed. All Might and Bruce were beaten badly, and All for One's power seemed to be endless. His hope was fading with each passing second. All Might, thought Izuku, you have to win. You have to survive. Please. You know, All Might, said All for One. As much as you hate me, I think I probably loathe you more. All Might coughed, wiping blood from his mouth. He was losing power fast. Soon he would be helpless before his enemy. He had to end this fast. But All for One's quirks and fighting tactics were completely changed from the last time he faced him. He couldn't attack him head on. He would have to adjust his strategy, use his wits. I killed your master, sure, continued All for One. But you took away so much from me, everything I tried to build. That is why I want you to suffer until your last breath, and die broken and disgraced, for all the world to see. All for One shot another powerful blast at All Might, enveloping All Might and sending Batman and Gran Torino flying. As the dust around them settled, All Might was still standing, but his arms and torso had been reduced to its sickly depowed form, blood dripping from his brow. Let the world see you for how weak you really are, All Might, said All for One. Hollow cheeks and sunken eyes. To think that you are their greatest hero. Now your adoring public knows your true form. Try not to be ashamed. Even as my body rots and grows frail, said All Might. Even as you expose my weakened state, in my heart I remain the symbol of peace. And nothing you can say will take that away from me. Is that so? Said All for One. Well, there might be something else you would be interested to know that will take the spring out of your step. My apprentice, Tamura Shigaraki. He's Nana Shimura's grandson. All Might gasped in shock. That can't be. It is, said All for One. I kept wondering what would destroy your golden heart, and then I found Tamura. I groomed him to hate you, and watched as you smiled so proudly as you tried to destroy your master's descendant. You're lying. Come now, you know it's the truth, said All for One, cackling evilly. Strange, where is your smile now, All Might? Horrible thoughts rushed through All Might's head. His master's grandson being raised and groomed by her sworn enemy, the very man that killed her, turning him into a villain. My God, he thought, what would she say if she knew how we turned out? All for One suddenly flinched as several objects collided with him, exploding on impact. All Might turned to see Batman at his side. His suit was damaged and he was injured. Bruce, said All Might. How could this have happened? Forget about that, All Might, said Batman. Listen to someone who has failed to protect someone they care about before. You are the symbol of peace. Only you can restore the hope these people have in you. Only you can finish this. Another large blast of energy came out of the smoke that enveloped All for One, blasting Batman away. He hit the damaged wall behind them before being buried in rubble. Batman, no, shouted All Might. He is in the way, said All for One. It's time to end this, All Might. You bastard, said All Might. Concentrating his power into his right arm, it regained his muscular shape. He remembered the words of his master, Nana Shimura, spoken to him years ago as a young student. Toshinori, when you think you can't go on anymore, look inside. Remember why it is you clench your fist. Remember where you came from. Keeping your origin in mind will help you push past your limit. Gran Torino struggled as he moved the rubble that had buried Batman. His armor was terribly damaged, with several pieces broken and missing. He was wounded badly, blood seeping from several open wounds that were exposed from the broken armor. Despite all of this, when the rubble was removed, Batman staggered to his feet. Thank God, said Gran Torino. I was afraid you were dead. I don't die easily, said Batman. And good thing too, Gran Torino replied. Things are looking grim. Toshinori is almost out of power. His body just won't hold up anymore. I don't know if he can win. He has to, said Batman. How do you mean? None of the other heroes can inspire hope like All Might, said Batman. No matter what he looks like, he is still the #1 hero, the symbol of peace in this country. And everyone here is praying for his victory. He's the pillar of support that everyone relies on. A pillar that must not be broken. And he knows it. And that's why he's going to win. Interesting, said All for One, hovering over All Might. You should have been out of power long ago, but you still continue to cling to that small bit of hope inside you. All for One began to rise off the ground, floating in midair. You probably only have a few punches left in you. I am the symbol of peace, All Might said. I want to make a world where everyone smiles and lives together happily. I still have much to fight for, which is why I will defeat you. Let's stop dwelling on heroism and start focusing on reality, said All for One. Spring-like limbs, kinetic booster ×4, strength enhancer ×3, multiplier, hypertrophy, rivets, airwalk, spear-like bones. As he said these things, his right arm seemed to start growing, ripping the sleeve of his suit as it expanded. As it grew, several large spikes and objects seemed to sprout and grow from within it, forming into an enormous, grotesque monstrosity, barely resembling its former self. Everything up to now was simply to wear you down, said All for One. I knew it would take much more than that to kill you. In order to put you down for good, I'll punch you with the ultimate combination of quirks I have stored within me right now. This will end you. All for One rushed towards his foe, throwing his attack with a force to rock the foundations of the earth. All Might returned the blow with one in kind, connecting fist to fist with All for One. The immense shock of two unstoppable forces colliding caused a massive shockwave, with debris and wreckage flying all around them as they continued their struggle. It's clear that despite your weakening power, you still haven't passed on One for All, said All for One. It's also clear that you wanted izukumidoriya to be your next successor, but he refused you because you refused him first. And what's more, you couldn't prevent him from being taken right out from under your nose. It seems you'll die tonight full of regrets, as a hero and a teacher. All Might's knees began to buckle under the sheer power of his enemy's might. You're right, he said. I failed to see the hero he could become when we first met, as my master saw in me. I failed him as a teacher and a mentor. Blood sprayed from his arm as he pushed back against his foe, which is why I have to make it up to him. With a heavy heave, All Might pushed forward, throwing All for One off balance. I will make it up to him, shouted All Might. I will be here for him just as my master was for me, until he becomes the hero I know he can be. Golden sparks accumulated around his left arm as he transferred his power, throwing a powerful hook into All for One's face, smashing the rest of his life support brace. All Might continued to advance on his enemy, seeing a small trace of surprise stretched across All for One's featureless face. United States of. All Might pulled the last of his power back into his right arm. With the force of several generations of wielders of One for All, delivered the final blow to his enemy. Smash! The area exploded around them, causing massive shockwaves and an eruption of debris and wreckage. Batman and Grand Tornado hit the dirt, shielding themselves from the aftershock. The world held its breath as the dust cleared, revealing the skeletal form of All Might standing over the broken and beaten All for One. With his last ounce of strength, he raised his fist into the air in triumph. Young Midoriya, All Might thought, I am here for you now, and I will never fail you again. So alright folks, that's all for today. Stay tuned for part 6. Do subscribe, like and share for more such videos. Press the bell icon to be notified first on release. See you in the next video. Till then, goodbye.